Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Oxygen. How much oxygen there is up here. Up here, he explains, and it is easier to breathe than in the middle of the street. The wind gently pushes the boy's chest, as if it wants to push him away from the edge of the roof, to make him sensible and not to do what he had planned. Sam took in a lungful of air and spread his arms out to the sides like birds spread their wings. One more step and he would soar. Yes, not for a long time, but it would be a real flight. There were people bustling about below, but from the height they looked like ants, just as small, restless, curious. They're huddled together and with their heads up, they've forgotten all their business. Everybody wants to know what's going to happen. Somebody's even got his cell phone out and is taking pictures. If I jump, will they review my flight? The boy grinned to himself. The feeling of playing a major role in this play made the boy wildly excited. They're all thinking about him now, watching him, worrying about him. And when he takes one step forward, a wave of terror will sweep over all these people. Some of them will probably scream. It's a shame. Mom doesn't know about any of this. But when they tell her it'll be like an explosion, then she'll wish she'd told him all those nasty things. It's okay. Crying, sobbing. She deserves it. How did she yell at him today? And all for nothing. Let his mom choke on that cell phone she took from him as punishment. Now he's gonna suck it up for nothing. At least Mom will realize that there are irreplaceable people out there. She'll definitely blame herself. She'll probably agree that she'd rather have him on the phone than like this. And this Robert. He's the nastiest man Sam has ever met in his life. He's definitely gonna be surprised. What's that? Well, he's not expecting a degree of determination like that. Let him and his mother feel guilty too. The boy was still replaying in his head the words of his stepfather, which he heard when he ran out of the apartment. He was telling their mom, and quite loudly, "Your boy is inadequate. Do you realize what a monster you've raised? He's a moral freak. He'd be safer in an institution. They know how to deal with them. But it's dangerous to live with him under the same roof. And all for what? For what? A trifle, like he didn't come home last night. Problem. He's 12 years old. Arguments are sacred." Sam bet the boys that he could spend all night in the basement of an old house without a flashlight. None of the boys believed him. They all said he was a coward. But Sam proved them wrong. He made it through the morning even though he was scared. He turned off his cell phone beforehand. He knew his mother would call him. After arguing with his mother and stepfather, Sam ran out of the apartment incredibly angry, slamming the door at the entrance with all his might. He also kicked it with his foot. Then the boy stuck his hand in his pocket out of habit, looking for his cell phone. Pocket's empty for sure, and it had been taken away. How should he contact his friends now? Well, nothing. Now he'll run to the abandoned construction site. Maybe the guys are sitting there tonight. They used to hang out there a lot. The construction site was near the stadium, where the boys liked to play soccer in their spare time. The construction site was inhabited by older guys, where you could smoke and sometimes even drink alcohol. All the same, it was interesting with them he tried smoking, so as not to fall in front of them in the dirt face. The boy didn't like cigarettes at all. Tears immediately came to his eyes. He wanted to cough, but he held back as much as he could, keeping, so to speak, the mark. Sam didn't find his boys at the construction site, but he met some older ones. They were sitting on the bricks, stacked and talking about something, laughing loudly. Sam knew two of them well. They frequented and attended the same school. But the third, who noticed the boy and quickly hid something behind his back, Sam saw for the first time. "The whole Sam thing's grown up. You don't have to hide yours," said one of the Sam guys I know. "Sam, what are you doing here?" "Taking a smoke break." "Yeah, it's important." "Sam, I'm looking for guys. I'm out of cigarettes." The unfamiliar guy took out a not quite ordinary cigarette from behind his back, puffed greedily, and handed it to his neighbor. It wasn't even a cigarette, but a cigarette. And it was not filled with tobacco, as Sam guessed at once, though he had never seen such things before. The stranger looked at Sam with a sly squint. "Are you crazy?" One of the boys coughed. "Choked on smoke." He's a kid. He's just a kid. Come on, what's going to happen to him? Come here, kid. The boy held out a cigarette with a cruel, unknown, slightly pleasant odor. The boy approached in disbelief, looking at the cigarette. There was no desire to inhale at all, but he was not going to show himself in front of the boys as a coward either. Inhaled. He came in immediately with a cough. It felt like all his insides were about to pop out. The first time is always like that. Encouraged, Sam stranger, come in, bring more. Kristenko trusted. It became incredibly easy. Thoughts fogged over. It was unusually good. Many degrees were confused and he swayed slightly. He walked away from the construction site. He wanted to fly exactly and precisely to fly. The boy badly remembered how he found himself on the roof of an apartment building, but well remembered what he was thinking at that moment. Now I will fly over the city, over the crowds of people, and there will be nothing else. Neither my mom, who is always dissatisfied with something, nor my ugly stepfather, who always curls his lips in disdain when he sees me. And most importantly, I wouldn't have to go home, where I'd be scolded and called a difficult teenager again. Sam stretched his leg forward and prepared to take a step. But the image of my grandmother popped into my mind. How would she be upset? As if on purpose. She'd been staying for a few days now. She's visiting them, and she's getting a checkup. There's something wrong with her heart. What if when she finds out, her condition worsens? Man, I feel sorry for Grandma. How do I make sure she doesn't find out? He didn't want to do that to her. He's also twisted his leg and back. Boy, can you hear me? You got something going on. Sam heard a nice voice behind him. When he turned around, he saw a pretty woman. She held her hands out to him, palms up, and continued. I'm standing still, you see. I'm not approaching you. Let's talk. I want to help you. What's your name? Sam had recently turned 12, and he'd seen a lot of movies with crime plots. So he immediately guessed who this woman was. Now she's going to talk to him, coax him away from the edge, tell him that there are no unsolvable situations in the world. He took in more air into his lungs and took a step, but only backward. Sam stepped carefully away from the edge of the roof. Don't waste time on me, he said. I didn't even want to jump. I don't know what you're all fussing about. The woman looked at the not quite adequate, from her point of view, teenager in disbelief, and did not hurry to run towards him. She persistently inquired about his problems in life. I have no problems and never had any. He kept saying the same thing. I didn't mean to jump. How many times do I have to tell you that? He took a steady gait and headed in her direction. When the boy was taken to the police station, he was sure he was going to be locked up in a cell with his criminal mothers. And what was his surprise when he found himself in a cozy office? There he was offered to sit on a soft sofa and placed in front of an armchair. Into it sat the very woman who had talked to him on the roof. She kept smiling, and some incredible calmness emanated from her. But no matter how many attempts she made to draw the guy into a conversation and find out the true reasons for his behavior, Sam remained stubbornly silent. He kept saying the same thing. And I didn't want to jump. I didn't want to jump. The psychologist spent a lot of time with the boy, but all to no avail. Then she decided to talk to his mother, who was waiting in the hallway. The woman was crying, sitting on a bench. The police had already talked to her. Unlike her son, she willingly agreed to talk to the psychologist. Yes, a few hours before we had a fight with Sam. Punished him by taking away his cell phone. Well, that's punishment, you know. All of his own free will. Always does what he wants. So we had to punish him. It's nothing new, sighed the psychologist. Kids that age are very attached to their phones. This year, they have their whole life. And of course, they react to such punishments quite acutely. To tell the truth, I never realized whether Sam was going to jump or not. But I think it was more of a demonstration. He wanted to scare you. Why do you think that? Sam's mom asked. He stepped off the edge of the roof on his own and didn't even have to be coaxed. And to put it mildly, is your son on drugs? What drugs? What are you talking about? He's only 12 years old. There's been some kind of mistake, I'm sure. I know Sam's age, but the fact remains. From the looks of it, he's been smoking pot. His clothes have a distinctive odor. You can take your son home, but take my advice. Take him to a doctor. Tonight and tomorrow, I'll visit you. You'll also have a visit from the child welfare authorities. I think you realize that your family will be under observation for some time. This is a nightmare. Prohibition was Jenna's idea. What's the shame? We're a normal family, no worse than anyone else. And now we're going to be monitored by the guardianship service. It's a disgrace. Sam walked all the way from the police station to his car with his head down. The psychologist followed him, and when she saw their car, she mumbled, as always, that parents have no money and no time to bring up their child. Jenna drove the car silently. She didn't feel like talking to her son yet. She only glanced at him occasionally in the rearview mirror. He continued to sit up to his head. The boy sat in the back, and all the way there, he never once looked at his mother. She figured he was terribly embarrassed. But in fact, Sam was terribly nauseous, and he was worried as if he would not vomit in the cabin of the car, because then the silence would be broken by the screams of his mother. Jenna did not call a doctor. She did not see the point. The son looked fine, but a small for breaking was present. But this is not a reason to see a doctor. But why is it that everyone has kids like kids, and he is like this? Why can't Sam behave normally? What is he trying to prove to everyone? Jenna sighed to herself. He always puts her in a stupid position. Now Robert is going to start saying that's exactly what he keeps saying, Robert. Remembering her husband, Jenna stretched herself out a little, turning the mirror to look at her reflection. Back then, about 6 years ago, when he begun his courtship, she hadn't even believed his intentions were sincere. It had never occurred to her that she would be courted by such a handsome and young guy. She was already 38 then, and he was not even 30. Well, to tell the truth, the beautiful Jenna also did not consider herself attention. Men, she has never been spoiled. Not even when she found out she was pregnant with Sam. His father slipped away in a heartbeat. She's never built a relationship with anyone else since. And now this is a gift. Her friends whispered to her that a young Alfonso had taken Jenna's money. But Jenna thought they were just jealousy. Yes, she made good money, but Robert really loved her. She was sure of it. He's a very caring and attentive husband. Yes, he doesn't work, but they spend all her free time together, and she's incredibly happy. The only person she was happy with was Sam. He never got along with his stepfather. For 6 years now, he had not wanted to put up with Robert being in their house. In principle, Jenna understood her son's behavior and knew his reasons. The boy had been spoiled by his mother's attention for a long time. Mom was only his. And now her attention had to be shared with someone else. Sam was a Nightingale child during his marriage. But after the wedding, it's like he was possessed by a demon. In the principal's office, she now went as if to her home. Now and then she paid for that broken glass, that ruined door of the office in which in the very center stood a huge hole. And recently Sam had chipped the toilet. It seemed that the boy didn't know what he could do to surprise everyone around him. Not only did he not show up last night, he didn't show up at all today. Well, of course he wouldn't jump. He's just doing everything to spite her. Sam always complained to his mom about Robert calling him names when his mom wasn't home. But Jenna refused to believe it. She was sure her son just wanted to keep them apart, and he was doing his best to do it. She had seen Robert spank Sam a couple times in front of her, of course, but that was from the end. And there's nothing wrong with that. A man's upbringing hasn't hurt anyone yet. Behavior should be normal. The woman parked in front of her house and, getting out of the car, waited for her son. But the boy didn't come out. She quickly walked over and ripped open the back door of the car. "Why are you undressed? I'll be waiting for you for a long time. Or are you thinking of something else to do?" Ono got out of the car quickly. "No," Sam shook his head. "I'm not going home." Jenna grabbed her son by his sleeve and pulled with all her might, not afraid to tear his sweater. Robert was always grumbling that he shouldn't buy this kid expensive brand-name clothes. He hadn't learned to appreciate that kind of attitude, but the woman only laughed in response. Who was to say? Her son's clothes cost pennies compared to Robert's. That's who she was really spending it on. Her husband was always dressed to the hilt, and Jenna loved it. She loved to catch envious female glances at him. She had the most handsome husband, and she was so proud. He belonged only to her. "You're going out anyway, you asshole," hissed the woman and tugged at her sleeve. So the fabric screeched faintly. Sam tumbled out of the car, barely able to stand on his feet. "Robert Doma?" he asked, glancing at his mother sideways. "What do you think?" "He actually lives there and is waiting impatiently for his stepson," the woman shouted. "Mom, yeah, I'm sorry. I really didn't mean to jump off the roof. I don't even know why I went up there. Well, just to see the view from the top. And I'm well aware of all that." She pushed her son towards the house. "Let's go home and talk." Robert watched with indignation as mother and son entered the apartment. He was relieved when a familiar car drove into the yard. And the bastard showed up. The man curled his lips contemptuously. "Don't you want to live a normal life? I decided to fly this time." How did this kid annoy Robert? His anger made his insides prickle. Not only did he have to live with Jenna, let's face it, not the most attractive women in town, but he had to put up with the antics of her son. And he just wanted a quiet life. Robert looked at Sam carefully and asked in surprise, "Iyer, has he been injected with something?" "No. According to the psychologist, he's on something. Some kind of weed." "Weed. That's the last thing we need." The man theatrically grabbed his head. "He's only 12 years old. What's next?" "Jenna, you realize there's nowhere else to go. I keep telling you, your son's not gonna grow up to be anything good. Can't you see that? Or are you okay with it? You can't just turn a blind eye and tell yourself nothing's going on. He's going downhill. And if you don't do something about it now, he'll do the same to us if we say a word against him. He's growing. And the longer you drag it out, the more insolent and out of control it becomes." "What are you trying to tell me?" Jenna didn't understand. "There are special institutions for troubled children. There are psychologists who work with them. I'm not asking you to give him up or kick him out of the house, am I? No, but he should be in a place that's meant for kids like that. You can't handle him. Just admit it. We already have a psychologist visiting us," Jenna said tiredly, "and in company with the child welfare authorities. So I think we have enough professionals in our lives for now. Are you serious? It's come to this. That's the kind of Jep we've been missing. But in principle, why am I surprised? It's pretty clear how this could have ended. You think you're the smartest? And now we'll be proudly branded as a dysfunctional family. And by the way, it's not me, it's you who'll be labeled a bad mother." Robert switched to Sam. "There's nothing to say. The bastard's happy. Why don't you say something? Or are you still high?" He decided to jump off the roof. "What changed your mind? Wouldn't that have made life easier for everyone? I'll make you jump off the roof." Suddenly a loud, commanding voice came from deep inside the apartment. And a couple of seconds later, the grandmother appeared in the hallway. The elderly woman was small in stature with an expressive, stern face and a tenacious gaze. "Mom," exclaimed Jenna, "but only you were missing." Robert is trying to educate Sam. "Educate," the woman stretched out. "That's what it's called now. Insulting a child and suggesting that he jump off a roof after all. That's what it's called now." The old woman flashed a look of utter hatred at Robert, and he involuntarily folded. "And you're a miserable Alfonso. If I ever hear you say that to my grandson again, I will personally throw you off the roof." "Kelly, you don't know the situation," Robert wailed in a falsetto. "This kid is inadequate. He's not a kid, he's my grandson. And may I remind you, Jenna is your son." "I agree. But who walks the walk at his age? Have you tried giving the boy a little attention, a little love, a little affection? When was the last time you hugged him? You just spit on the boy all the time. Jenna, how can you even let that happen?" She pointed her finger in Robert's direction, raising your voice to your son. "Mama Sam needs some fatherly male companionship." "What fatherly? Where do you see a father around here, or at least a man? Open your eyes." Finally, he's even dressed like a girl, and his hair is probably styled at the salon. And the most interesting thing is, where does he get the money for all this beautiful life? Never works a day in his life. Kelly ran in again, Robert. "I'm a college-educated man. You have no idea how many times I've had to turn down decent offers because Jenna is against it." And on the contrary, in front of Kelly's man partition, That's what the man says to me, sucking on her like a leech before you can get rid of your son. Jenna, I didn't realize you were so blind. Think about it for a minute. If you were poor as a church mouse, he'd stick around for a second. No, he wouldn't even look in your direction. Mom's flashed enough, Jenna. I don't want to hear any more of this in my own house. You don't need to come into my family with your rules. Where there's a family, your son is your family, but you're not interested in him. You're looking into your Alfonso's mouth, and he's already decided to put your boy in boarding school. Jesus, Jenna, you're such an idiot. Here's what we're gonna do. Sam comes with me, lives in the country for a while. It won't. Jenna was indignant. We'll have a psychologist for a while, and we'll be in school for another month. That's great. So I'll stay with you guys until summer. What do you mean? Robert started stuttering. Kelly, you said the evaluation would last a week at the most, and then you can go home. Come summer, we'll be happy to deliver your grandson to you. Jenna noticed how her spouse blushed with indignation. He already had a hard time accepting the presence of his mother-in-law in their apartment, and agreed only for as long as the examination lasted. Mom, you are like a little girl, so that Sam would spend the summer with you. It's a wonderful idea, but you don't have to wait for him. We'll bring Robert ourselves, especially since you have a farm in the village. That's all right. I've made a deal with my neighbor. I'm staying, and I'm not changing my mind. And don't try to kick me out. Remember my daughter who bought you this apartment. And remind her, haha. So I have every right to live here as long as I see fit. Come on, Cap. I'll feed you dinner, and then we'll have tea and cake. Kelly approached her grandson, unceremoniously parted unceremoniously. At that, Robert and his daughter. Sam pressed his back against the front door and was afraid to move. He silently watched the squabble of the adults of the village. He didn't like it at first and was even a little upset. After all his friends were here, and summer was such a fun time. Although if you look at it that way, where Robert is, there's not much fun, because he might eventually get his mother to send him to that awful boarding school. Then the countryside is the way out, and he'd go to the end of the world with his grandmother. He loved her so much, in spite of the fact that she was always a strict, bossy woman. Sam always felt a huge wave of love from her. He used to feel it from his mother, too, until the ubiquitous Robert came into their lives. Frankly, Sam had forgotten the last time his mom had hugged or kissed him. Kelly hugged her grandson tightly around the shoulders, pulling him close to her, bypassing his stepfather. Sam couldn't help himself and gave him a victorious look. Only a grandmother could put this upstart in his place. And Grandma was on Sam's side. Grandma brought herbs and brewed tea, the aroma of which instantly filled every corner of the spacious kitchen. Sam breathed and felt his condition instantly improve. A familiar picture immediately surfaced in his mind. His grandmother's house in the village, the huge veranda where he slept in the summer under a cotton blanket, and the morning silence, which was broken only by the neighbors' roosters. Sam closed his eyes. A whole summer in the village. What about the boys? All right, there was still a month ahead of him, but the boy was most happy about the fact that all this month his grandmother would be near him, which meant that Robert would not dare to humiliate or beat him anymore, as he had done in his mother's absence. The beautiful summer season was coming to its logical end. If Sam had known beforehand that life in the village was so wonderful, he would not have doubted it for a moment then. The question with friends was solved on the very first day of his arrival. He made new ones. Among the new friends were the local boys, and many of those whom his parents had sent away for the summer. From morning till evening, they ran around the village, spent a lot of time at the local pond, went around the strawberries and in the fields. In a word, they did not sit idle. To walk Grandmother allowed until late at night, but Sam never did so because he knew that she would not go to bed until he came home. And then it would affect her health. He cherished his grandmother, and Sam would come home with joy. His grandmother used to make his favorite pies. In the morning, there was always steamed milk on the table. But most importantly, his grandmother was waiting for him. She loved him, and he felt it when he lived with his mother and stepfather. He knew he wasn't welcome home. He was not without mischief, of course. No matter how hard Sam tried to restrain his ebullient nature so as not to upset his grandmother, he didn't always succeed. One of the most memorable was probably the fire. Sam and two friends had built a fire at a local farm to roast sausages, and almost got burned as a result. The boy had never seen his grandmother so angry. He will never forget how she used to beat him with nettles and on his bare feet. Of course, he didn't resent her, he deserved it. There was one thing he regretted. The summer was over very quickly, and on the penultimate day of August, his mother came to pick up the boy by train alone and did not agree to stay overnight. "Mom, I can't stay here for long. First of all, I have a lot of things to do, and secondly, there is only one day left, and Sam is not dressed for school." "Well, all right," agreed the old woman. "You go ahead. But I'll tell you right away, Jenna, you have to discipline your husband. Make sure Sam doesn't borrow. Everyone as a child is spoiled. You two were not a gift of fate in terms of character. Remember, leave the boy alone." Listening to her mother's admonition, Jenna remained silent. She realized now that she hadn't missed her son at all. And this summer had been one of the best. Robert had been attentive, and they hadn't fought at all. They even went on vacation to the sea, and she was bathed in the attention of her spouse. Jenna expected that during these 3 months her son would settle down. She could not leave him at his grandmother's for good, because the boy had to go to school, so there was nowhere to go. So here she was. To Sam's surprise, Robert met him calmly and even a little kindly. The boy could not think how much his stepfather was waiting for his return, except that his plans were not the brightest. This summer, Robert had fallen in love. His new date was a beautiful young girl, and since Jenna worked very hard, Robert could meet her without hiding. But such girls like expensive gifts, and it takes a lot of money. Of course, in money, Jenna did not limit Robert, but still for large sums had to give explanations. And recently a young girlfriend hinted at a new phone. And that's when the stepfather remembered about the package. The plan in his head matured instantly. At the end of the first school week, Sam was in a hurry to get home from school. Robert had recently called him and offered to go with him to the store to pick out a new refrigerator. It was a very surprising offer to Sam, but he couldn't refuse. He had often heard Robert explaining to his mother in recent weeks that they needed a new refrigerator. The old one had fallen completely into disrepair. Food was spoiling or going overboard in there. And it was agreed that he would also withdraw the necessary amount. And on Friday, they could go shopping. But she herself could not go because there was a lot of work, and stepfather offered Sam to keep him company. About what in general lately behaved very strangely. He did not rush to the boy for all sorts of trifles, talking to him on various topics. Sam decided that Robert was trying to establish a relationship between them and was happy to make contact himself. Maybe if they began to communicate with him, his mother would be kinder to him. Everyone entered the apartment at the same time as his mother, who had returned from work and whom Robert had called home on an urgent matter. "What's wrong?" asked the woman from the threshold. "Why are you hiding?" "I'm off work in broad daylight." "I hope the reason is a good one." With these words, she glanced at her son, who was taking off his shoes in the hallway, and sighed with relief. When Robert called, she thought Sam had done something wrong again. But apparently she was wrong. The reason was something else. Her son was completely calm. But after a few minutes, she realized that her worst fears had been confirmed. "Jenna, the money's gone." The worried husband shrieked when he saw his wife. "You remember Sam and I were going to get the refrigerator today. So while I was waiting for him, I pulled some cash out of the nightstand. And it was empty. No money. I went through the whole apartment. I don't understand. Where could it have gone?" Jenna was confused. "You've certainly looked around." The woman rushed into the bedroom and looked all over the nightstand. Then looked back at her husband frozen in the doorway with Sam. "There really isn't any," she shrugged. "Had we really been robbed? Jenna, who would rob us? Come to think of it, the thieves themselves. They take the jewelry too, but it's all there. I checked. Only the money's missing." Then again, how would the thieves know the money's in the nightstand? The apartment's clean. Sam got a chill down his spine when his mom and stepdad gave him a stern look. "Son," Mom said softly, "did you have something to do with this?" The boy silently snapped back. "Mom, I had nothing to do with it. I didn't take it. And then Robert behaved very unexpectedly. This was not his usual behavior at all. Jenna, let's not get all hot and bothered and blame Sam. We could just go and look in his room. I'm sure we won't find anything in there. Sam was furious at the unfair accusations, and when they found new headphones, a carton of expensive cigarettes, and a few other things under his mattress, the anger turned to surprise. That's not mine, gave the bewildered boy. I've never seen these things in my eyes. Tears, resentment, eyes, and Sam could not in any way consider on the scoreboard schedule of electric trains. He needed to find out the time at which the train to his grandmother's village was running. After all the accusations, he jumped out of the apartment and ran away right in his school uniform. First to the construction site, and then he decided to go to his grandmother's house. His cell phone was left in his backpack. There was no money either, and the boy walked to the train station. Despite the fact that he walked for a long time to the station, it was not a long way. He couldn't calm down. Tears were streaming down his cheeks, and he wiped them away, but they flowed again. How unfair was all this? Okay, Robert, but Mom, why wouldn't she believe him, her own son? Yeah, I agree. He could be up to something, but he's not a thief. He would never steal. There were guys in their group who would slip a candy bar or a stick of gum into their pocket at the supermarket. And Sam always condemned them for doing that. He always had a very negative attitude towards stealing. And now his own mother is accusing him. Doesn't she know him at all? I could still see the look of contempt in her eyes. And Robert kept missing her. All his goodwill was gone in an instant. He yelled and yelled, spitting saliva. Thief, have you no shame? You have no conscience at all. Stealing from your own family is the last thing you do. You stole from your mother. You've been in jail for a long time. Even boarding school won't help you. I told you a long time ago, but you never listened to me. He addressed his wife. Look what your kindness has brought you to. Do you like it? It's not me who repeated the boy, Mom, but why don't you believe me? Belittling? Looked at his mother with eyes full of tears. But then how do you explain all this? The woman pointed with her hand at the things scattered on the floor pulled out from under the mattress. With what money did you buy all this, and when? I didn't buy this. It's not mine. I don't know how they got here. It's silly to deny the obvious. Jenna was still calm, and that really scared the boy. And Mom's look, she never looked at him like that. Even when he had almost jumped off the roof, Robert had yelled nonstop, calling the boy every slick word he knew. And that's when Sam couldn't take it anymore and let his feelings come out. He did something he'd never let himself do to Robert. Shut up, he screamed. Shut up, asshole. You're lying to your mother, and you always have. Out of surprise, Robert stopped talking and stared at his stepson with his mouth open. But Sam couldn't see it anymore. He couldn't see anything in front of him at all, because tears had made his eyes water. Resentment is what swept over his head. He ran out of the apartment and ran for his life. When he got to the construction site, he stopped to catch his breath. They won't look for him here. And it's unlikely anyone would look for him at all. What to do now? Who do we go to so his mom can't find him and bring him home? Because then she will definitely give him up to the boarding school. Sam was sure of it, because he stole money, because he was rude to his stepfather. And Mom listens to her stepfather in everything. She doesn't need such a son now. Grandma is the one who can help him. She'll believe him. I wish I could get to her. She'll give him a dove's hug, hold him close. He'll tell her everything, and she'll realize he had nothing to do with it. He didn't take those 3 oaths of money. And now the boy is at the train station studying the electronic board. And again, he fails. There are no more trains for today, only tomorrow. What to do? Where to spend the night? You can't go to your friends, and Mom will find you in a heartbeat. The only way out is the street. I'll have to spend the night there. Sam spent the rest of the day walking around the city. And in the evening, he went back to the station. It was light, and the benches were open. The boy did not take one thing into account. The policeman, very quickly lonely, sitting child in a school suit attracted their attention. When Sam noticed the interested look of the policeman, he immediately jumped out into the street and walked away from the place with a quick step. What now? Where to spend the night? Maybe in the basement again. Sam remembered his night spent in a dark basement on a bet and shuddered. No, he wouldn't want to do that again. He'd rather go to the construction site, like the one he and his friends used to run out to smoke in. He had to find a construction site like that and wait out the night there. Sam looked for a building until it was dark, but to his misfortune there was nothing like it. He was beginning to despair when he saw an abandoned building. It had once been a business, but now it was just a dilapidated house with a hole in the roof and broken windows. It took walking around the building before he could find the entrance. There had once been a door here, but it had been kicked in, and the doorway gaped with the blackness of that one. He walked cautiously, the crunch of bodies, shards of broken bottles, and remnants of bricks beneath his feet. Fear made his hair stand on end. The teenager decided not to go far into the depths, but entered the first room near the roundabout. Glancing around, he shuddered with surprise when he realized that he was not alone here at the wall. In the faint candlelight sat two homeless men. Full could not be determined. One of them was holding a salty glass with an incomprehensible liquid, and the other was eating something. Sam stood up like a stumbling block, not understanding what to do. When they heard the sound of footsteps, they turned around and looked into the darkness. Is it a kid? Supposed one of them in a hoarse voice. Why are you working here? Nothing, Sam answered fearfully. Can I stay here till morning? I won't disturb you. The bums looked at each other. Did you run away from home? Sam hesitated to answer. You don't have to answer, it's all clear. One of them laughed hoarsely. Despite the hoarse voice, Sam concluded that it was a woman. Yes, I don't feel sorry for the neighbors, but we have nothing to offer you. Yes, I'm not hungry. Thank you, Sam lied. Although at the mention of food in his stomach screamed in the meager candlelight. The boy made something like a bench out of bricks and sank down on it tiredly. The homeless didn't bother the boy with questions. They continued drinking without paying much attention to him. Sam boiled quickly from fatigue, and he fell asleep right away leaning against the cold brick wall. Finished chanting his mash, the man stood up and went to go to the bathroom. As he passed Sam, he stopped and scrutinized him closely. The boy was illuminated by the light of a lantern through the window aperture. A bum came in, look at the price of a suit. And I think you can get one of these for a couple of bubbles at the market. Everybody woke up and didn't realize what was happening to him. But when he realized that someone else's hands were on his body, it was very scary. It was dark, only the unbearable stench of those filthy people. And a lot of them hear Jacket mumbled about the punctured, about the bums, trying to undo the buttons and pants. Take off your suit, you'll pay for the night. What did you think, for free? We're gonna let you in. Meanwhile, the policeman stared in bewilderment at the well-groomed woman sitting in front of him. Did I understand you correctly? So your 12-year-old son left home yesterday and hasn't returned yet. And you just now decided to come to us. And Jenna didn't know what to say. Well, how do I explain this to you? It's not that simple. My son, you know, he's a troubled teenager, and he's never come home at night before. So I wasn't too worried, and I had every hope that he'd come home. The policeman who took Jenna's statement looked at her judgmentally. Usually moms panic if their child doesn't contact them for an hour. This one hasn't been home for 24 hours, and she's waiting. Jenna knew exactly what the cop was thinking. And she wanted to tell him everything as it was, that her son had stolen money from her. And now he's probably skipping out on the leftovers with friends, as bad as he is. But the words of the mother they'd spoken to on the phone a couple of hours ago rang in her head. I hope you have the brains not to tell the police he stole the money. That's a lie. I'll never believe it. And I'll never stop wondering if Sam's gonna be booked. I'll come down that very day and file a report on your Alfonso for having anything to do with this theft. And I don't even doubt it. Expiring. That's a hell of a guess. The boy hasn't been home in 24 hours, and she doesn't even scratch. Mom, I was sure he'd run and come back, wherever he went. That's the way it's always been. And you're not slandering Robert, are you? What's the point of him stealing? He gets everything he wants. My husband has nothing to do with it. But my son does. I'm tired of telling you. Daughter, you're a complete fool. Look for your son. Now Shura and the police to report him missing and do whatever he says. I'd come to town myself, but what if he comes here, doesn't find me and leaves? Then we won't find the boy at all. And I don't want you to say anything about the money. Jenna threw the phone down, the only reason she called her mother. She hoped that Sam was at his grandmother's, and she wouldn't have to embarrass herself at the police station. But she would. The cop handed Jenna a business card. I'll explain. We'll do what we have to do in these cases, but I strongly advise you to call this number. They're volunteers. We can't take too long to find them. They're responsible people, and they're gonna start canvassing the city today. Jenna grumbled nicely, taking the card from the policeman's hand. Meanwhile, Sam sat in an abandoned building by Cotton's, and in an old dirty bedspread that the bums had left him when they took away all his clothes, leaving the boy in just his panties. When he woke up in the middle of the night and realized that the bums were trying to steal his costume off him, he began to fight back furiously, but the odds were stacked against him. As a result, Sam had a bruise under his left eye. After taking the suit, the bums headed for the exit. But at the last moment, the woman turned around and threw him some smelly rag. It was an old bedspread, or else. Sam was disgusted to touch that rag, which smelled very bad. But it was very cold. It was September. After sitting for a while with my grandfather on the icy bricks, he froze. So we couldn't get a tooth on a tooth. We moved to our unit. He grabbed a blanket and plunged into it. He tried not to breathe. It got warmer, and then it didn't fully work. And the rest of the night, Sam sat there without closing his eyes, every now and then jumping up and down on the spot to keep warm. It was morning, and Sam sat like that by his brow. How would he go to the train station looking like that? In the first place, it would be embarrassing. And secondly, people, seeing him, will realize that the child is in trouble. They'll take him to the police, call the mother. She'll tell them all about the theft, and that's it. Sam's in juvie. Just as Robert had prophesied to him, the boy ran around the abandoned and building all day, looking out all the overgrown windows. He hoped that some teenager about his age would pass by and ask for help. Some closed, though, so as not to draw attention to himself. Except that the abandoned building was in an industrial zone, and passersby were rare there, let alone children. At least it was a warm day and the boy could finally warm up, or at least stop shaking. But another problem of the step had set in, his stomach. He was hungry and thirsty. It came to the point that the boy, in desperation to rake through the garbage left by the homeless in the hope of finding them there at least something with a clear. But except for rotten apple, gnaw, and empty tin cans, he found nothing. In the evening, Sam was ready to burst into tears again. It was clear that today's train to his grandmother had also left long ago, and he was still here. He was sure he had grown up and wasn't a child for a long time. But even now, ashamed as he was of it, he wanted his grandmother. He would have given anything just to cuddle up to her, to feel her soft, warm palms on his shoulder. She was the only person in this world whom he trusted and who believed him. The evening smoothly turned into a dark night, and Sam saw the weak spot of a flashlight in the window. He ran over to the window and took a closer look. He realized that the very homeless people were returning for a sleepover. They probably always sleep here. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the dim light of the lantern and returned to roll under an old blanket. Who shrieked? A bum. Kid, what are you doing? You've been here all day. Why didn't you go anywhere? In that thin, trembling voice, shaking with fear and excitement, Sam answered. Sam's clothes were successfully sold to Grandma, as you planned. Seeing it yesterday on the boy, they realized that the suit is expensive. Jenna's desire for expensive things played a cruel joke on Sam. I'm thirsty. Do you have water? Asked Sam. Shit, kid. Yes, you do. You must be thirsty. All right, kind we go today, we'll feed you. And a few minutes later, Sam sat side by side with a dog, liced his bums, and stuffed his mouth with Sprat in the same sauce, drinking it with water from a dirty bottle. He didn't even remember his squeamishness anymore. Having eaten enough, Sam went to his stack of bricks and tried to sleep. The bums were watching the kid closely. Who was he to me to spend money on him? I didn't say to buy it. Well, look in the garbage. He He's squinting in the cold, and it's our fault. The ER doctor looked at the elderly woman with a frown. Your ear hurts, and that's with your diagnosis. I need to get you to the hospital right away. You don't have to stay home. It's dangerous. I can't, Kelly replied stubbornly. Let's get a shot, take a pill, eat anything. But I'm not leaving the house. What are you, like a little girl? Well, we'll take it off now. What if you have a heart attack with your diagnosis? But what kind of things are diagnoses? You shouldn't have shown me that paperwork in the first place. Ignoring her ailments, Kelly continued to speak in her commanding tone. And the doctor made concessions, giving the elderly woman an injection. She stayed for a while until Kelly was better. Then she left, lamenting that stubbornness never did any old man any good. After the ambulance left, Kelly jumped out of bed, grabbed her simple cell phone, and went outside the gate, sitting down on a wooden bench. With a drowsy paint job, she kept her eyes on the horizon. The woman was expecting the skinny figure of her grandson to appear any minute now on the only road leading into their village. This was the spot Kelly had been sitting in ever since Jenna had called her to inform her that Sam was missing. The old woman had been worried sick with worry. Sometimes she wanted to leave everything behind and rush out to find her grandson. But her intuition told her that staying in the house would help her to come here. She had to be patient and wait. And the woman waited, despite the pain in her heart. If it got worse, she listened to the pain with pills. And if it was unbearable, the ambulance came to help. You have to live, she said like a mantra, holding her chest. You can't die. Not now, they're gonna kill the wall without me. Oh, Jenna, why have you become such a fool? I guess I didn't whip you enough when you were a kid. And there she was again. Kelly pulled out her cell phone and looked at the time. Yes, the train had arrived at the station a minute ago. It would be about 10 minutes to her house. The woman looked again at the dusty, abandoned black road. 7 minutes. It's been 7 minutes. Is it all for nothing again? Wait, who's coming? A faint figure appeared on the road and was approaching very fast. No, someone's not walking, they're running. The locals were walking quietly. Kelly's heart was racing with excitement so that she could hear its own beats. She put her hand on her chest and winced slightly, as if coaxing her heart to calm down. Lord, hear me. Only if it were Sam, she whispered. As the fleeing Kelly approached, she couldn't hold back the tears of joy. Although she hadn't seen the teenager's face yet, she recognized the gait. He was her favorite grandson. That's Sam. And the boy flew with all his legs from the station and was already exhausted. But as soon as he saw his grandmother, who was slowly coming up to meet him, Sam immediately got a second wind and ran even faster. Grandma mumbled, the boy with a sprint, crashed into her warm side and wrapped his arms around her as strong as he could. Sam, Kelly cried. What the boy had dreamed of every second while shaking from the cold in the abandoned building had come true. Grandma hugged him, kissing the top of his head and stroking his shuddering back. I knew you would come to me, I knew it. Let's go to the house. You'll take care of everything. As her grandson ran up to her, and the woman had time to consider how ungraceful he was. He was dressed, and not in the weather. The pre-war pants were subverted too, and the t-shirt hung down to his knees with a hole in the shoulder. That kind of stuff should be thrown in the trash. Kelly's mind flashed. She hadn't realized what had been found. They were just in the dumpster by drunken bums. And already in half an hour washed and dressed Sam flew away hot chicken soup with homemade lard. Grandmother sat opposite, across the cheek with her hands, and watched her grandson with tenderness. Oh, I completely forgot to inform your mother that you had found yourself. The old woman caught up. Grandma, maybe it's not worth it? Sam got worried and put aside his spoon. She's going to tell you all kinds of bad things about me, like the fact that you stole the money. The boy nodded. I already know everything, and I don't believe a word they say. I know exactly who is really responsible for the theft, but your mother refuses to believe it. But whatever happens, she should know today is the third day that the police and volunteers have been looking for you. After your call, she'll take me home and put me in a boarding school. I don't want to go back to her. What boarding school are you talking about? Kelly was surprised. Robert told you that. I'd lay down my life, but I wouldn't let it happen. Grandma, can I live with you here in the village? Kelly sighed heavily. So it was clear that returning the boy to those monsters was not worth it, especially after everything that had happened. First, they'd driven the child to the point where he'd almost jumped off the roof, and then he'd run away from home. They're lucky they got away with it. They were one step away from tragedy. Costs. And Sam told his grandmother about the bums, and about the clothes, and how he lived for 2 days for a pittance. About the dinner with the bums and the train. There he cleaned a couple of times from the controllers, running from carriage to carriage. The boy laughed, remembering his adventures. The grandmother, on the other hand, was not laughing. Kelly, after the incident with the roof, wanted to take him to her forever, but the damned diagnosis stopped her, worn-out heart surrender and something there was with the valve. She couldn't have surgery because she might not survive it. She didn't know how much time she had left, maybe not long enough. Then she had to live. I have to live for my grandson, Kelly decided, and pulled out her cell phone. And Sam is here, yes, he is. Well, don't yell yourself. You should be asking how your son feels about finding his own way. And Sam will stay with me. Mom, that's impossible. First of all, the police are waiting for him. And secondly, the school. I'll pick him up tomorrow. You don't have to worry. Then I'll bring him myself and I'll stay with you for a while. The boy is alone with you. I won't leave him again, and don't dream of it. We all know you're not a very good mother. Now, about the money. Didn't I talk to you? Mom, you again? How many times do I have to tell you? Robert didn't take that money. Then who did? Sam, if you try to talk to him about that money, I warn you, you'll regret it. I'm not at my best, but I can still give you a hell of an apartment life. You don't want to take off your rose-colored glasses. Then forget about the money. But don't you dare mention it to Sam. Kelly had a lot more to say to her daughter before she hung up. She did it all in the other room so her grandson wouldn't hear her. And when she was done talking, she came out to the boy. Sam, you've definitely decided you want to move in with me. Are you sure? Yes, Grandma, it's my biggest dream. This summer was the best summer of my life, and I wish it never ended. I don't want to go home and see Uncle Robert and Mom. Not even Mom, Kelly quietly clarified. Sam lowered his head. Yes, Grandma, she doesn't want me. She loves Robert, listens to him in everything, and only scolds me. It was very easy for her to believe I took the money. That's why you believe me. He's been trying to get her to put me in a boarding school for a long time. He says I'm an inadequate, difficult teenager who needs to be isolated from normal people. And believe me, he's gonna talk her into it. I hear you. The only thing is, school in our village isn't until 9th grade. Well, we'll deal with problems as they come. You agree to study in our school. Of course, nodded enthusiastically teenager, in whose eyes appeared hope. But we're going to insist that you stay with me. We'll win, Kelly said. And Jenna was furious. She sat behind the wheel of the car and braked sharply. She didn't immediately notice the red light. Her mind was on something else. How angry was she at her mother who had gotten into this custody mess over the laundry? Not that Jenna minded. No, let her live, but unofficially. No paperwork. Why make this work? But to move Sam to a new school, you needed a reason. So no paperwork. So Kelly started the whole thing. But when the child welfare officials sided with the grandmother, Jenna was shocked. I mean, they'd been visiting their apartment for a long time. They didn't really like the family environment. And when the psychologist suggested terminating Jenna's parental rights, the woman was scared out of her wits. What do you mean, terminated? What kind of shame is that? What are you saying? I'm a bad mom. Look at the kid. He's dressed, he's got shoes, he's got everything in the house. He's got everything he could ever want. And the best. I disagree. Jenna was outraged. That's when Kelly asked her daughter to voluntarily sign the papers for temporary residence and Sam for family reasons. What kind of mom is a guardian? With her diagnosis, if the caseworkers found out about it, they couldn't even talk about custody. And then the Kellys threatened that if the daughter would just shut up about her heart, she'd give them a good time and move in with them. I won't trust you with my grandson under any circumstances. The old woman said, "You won't give in to me nicely. I'll live with you. And you can't stop that. And I bought this apartment." Robert, hearing his mother-in-law's threats, waved her hands at his wife. "Jenna, agree. Sign whatever she says. Let Sam live with her. We both know she's not bluffing. She'll be fine. She really will move in with us. She's bored of living in her old age. Let her have fun in the form of an inadequate grandson." "I cannot do that," wished Jenna Shoulders. "What people will say. How I will explain to friends why my son lives in the village with his grandmother. People, I don't care. But remember our last summer, how great it was. And now let's imagine we could live like that forever." And now Jenna was in a hurry to sign the papers. She'd been called away from work. The woman decided to sign, but she was still angry at the whole situation. It's embarrassing in front of her acquaintances. Well, let them say what they want. It's my life and my family. But now Robert and I will have peace in our family, muttered the woman and pressed the gas pedal. She sped forward. It's so nice, everything's so modern. Drove her manicured finger over the expensive finishes in the living room. A girl named Betty. Robert, why haven't we come here before? Always at work. This was indeed the first time Robert had brought his party here, and so he was very excited. There was no reason for excitement, of course. And she was forever coming back after her family. And Betty had been asking him to visit for a long time. Yes, Betty, it was known that he was married, and many other aspects of his and Jenna's married life. And that didn't bother the girl. She didn't care that her new boyfriend was married. After all, it does not prevent him to make her generous gifts. Betty took off her clothes on the couch. It's gorgeous. I don't know why you and I have been staying in hotels so far. You told me the hero was never home during the day. Robert, come here. Suddenly, the girl saw the home theater and jumped up from the couch. Let's have some music. It's loud. No need for neighbors. And that all the neighbors are having a daytime. And in the daytime, you can do everything you want to do, even repairs in the apartment. Let's put on some music. Robert obeyed the girl's wishes, but didn't turn up the volume much. He was afraid that Jenna's neighbors would report how he was having fun in her absence to his wife. It might seem suspicious. Robert was not a fan of music, and the man could not relax. He felt out of place after bringing the evil one here. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he had regretted it 100 times already. The feeling was unaccustomed. It felt like the front door was about to open, and Sam would walk in, back from school. "Roberto, you don't look like yourself." Betty was surprised, embracing the man with her hands. "How about a drink? It will help you relax." Indeed, after a couple of portions of cognac, which Robert drank one after another, it became much easier on the soul, and thoughts flowed more smoothly. "I'm just like our walking boy. Jenna is not coming, that's for sure. In all the time we've been together, it's never happened once that she's come home during the day for no reason. Sam's in the country at all. And with any luck, she won't be here again. She's agreed to sign all the papers. I wish I'd talked her into it. Thank God, that old witch will take her cursed one now. At least we'll live in peace, granddaughter. Robert, let's see your bedroom. Let's see." Betty interrupted the man's thoughts and pulled his hand playfully, shooting her beautiful eyes. Robert smiled, and drying his glass with the rest of the cognac, and putting it loudly on the coffee table, allowed himself to be led away to the bedroom. Wow, Betty clapped her hands in delight when she saw the huge bed. She let go of Robert's hand and sprinted onto it. Then, assuming seductive poses, patted the bedspread with the palm of her hand. "Darling, come to my place. I want to thank you for my new cell phone. And believe me, my gratitude will know no bounds." Those were the words Jenna heard. A couple of minutes ago, having returned home, having signed the custody papers, she did not want to go back to the office, but decided to stay near the robot, to discuss everything calmly. The loving couple did not hear her enter, because the music was playing loud enough, and the landlady froze like a stumbling block when she saw the woman's sandals in the hallway. Shedding her stupor, she tiptoed toward the bedroom. Her feet were audible. Chills pounded her body, but her hearing didn't fail her. She perfectly heard every word to her husband's young mistress, who was lying on their family bed. I hope Robert heard the phone, dear. His wife's voice somewhere behind him instantly became whiter than a sheet. Jenna's voice was icy. She was struggling to keep herself in check so as not to give away the storm of emotions that raged inside. The spouse could not think of anything more original than Jenna. It's not at all what you think. It's too late for second thoughts. Everything is clear except one thing: where the money for the expensive gifts comes from. But despite all efforts, I could not hold back my emotions for long and snapped into a shriek. Lefty screaming, "Get out! Get out of my apartment!" Both of them were scared out of their wits. The girl tried to blink between the spouses, but there was no way. Jenna, what out of strength, grabbed her by the hair. Robert, from shock, could not move so, and stood watching his wife dragging his mistress across the bedroom floor. But he didn't interfere. Decided that Jenna was doing just fine on her own. Jenna howled like a wounded wolf. Her head throbbed, a glowing ball of heat, and seemed about to explode with her hatred and anger. It hurt. How could it hurt? She'd given Robert all of herself, even let her son go to his grandmother and signed all the papers for temporary custody. Only if Robert was happy, only if they were well together and nothing spoiled their family idyll. And that bastard's been at it since he was young. But that wasn't enough for him, so he dragged her into their apartment. Jenna's apartment, to the marital bed. Who was he before he met Jenna? He was nothing. She dressed him up, bought him a car. She loved him more than life. Looked at every word, listened to every piece of advice. Bastard. What kind of bastard is he? While the girls were figuring things out, Robert frantically thought of excuses, even though he knew it was stupid. It was foolish to deny cheating. One should just beg him to forgive. Jenna sat on the floor, out of breath, and shot up with a bleeding cheek. Betty still managed to break free of the landlady's tenacious hands and ran out into the hallway with a bullet. Jenna looked at her husband carefully. The room was silent for a while. Robert was the first to break it. "Jenna, I beg you to forgive me. I was out of my mind. I didn't realize what I was doing. I swear it was the first and last time. It'll never happen again." "Of course it won't," agreed Jenna and nodded her head, getting up from the floor. "You better get this straight. Where'd you get the money for the fugitive's gifts? If I understand you correctly, it was not for the button and the phone that she wanted to thank you so much." The man was confused by this question. He had nothing to say. Jenna knew the answer to the question. "Do you want me to tell you with what money? You bought all this stuff, the money we were going to use to buy a refrigerator, right?" The man looked down guiltily, and the wife started screaming again. "You bastard, you scoundrel, you took the money yourself, blamed it on my son. And you put a carton of cigarettes in his pocket to make sure. God, I can't believe it. Because of you, my son is going to stay with his mother." Jenna was on the edge. She felt like she was about to burst. But how could she not want to do that in front of her shift worker? So she screamed, "Get out of my apartment so that my eyes don't see you. You make me sick." And Robert took a step toward his wife and held out his hands. But the woman recoiled like a leper. "Get out. I said I don't want to see you." The rest of the day and all night Jenna sobbed into her pillow, smearing bitter tears on it. Toward morning, she struggled to pull herself together to drive to work. She needed a distraction, but all her thoughts went back to the affair. She still did not understand what to do next and how to live. All her prosperous, beautiful life turned out to be a bubble. All her friends invite her. How would they gloat when they found out that her spouse had cheated on her? And Sam? She lost her son to that bastard. Robert didn't have much money, and he could only rent an apartment for a month. He didn't want to see Betty again. All he could think about was how to get Jenna back. And with it, his formerly prosperous life. You gotta make a living. Not a job, after all, especially since he didn't like it. Remembering the fire of rage in his wife's eyes when she kicked him out. It was useless to ask her for forgiveness now. Maybe later, when she calmed down. After living in the cheap apartment for 3 days, Robert dialed Jenna. She answered the phone the third time, and it was such a flood of swear words that Robert realized it was too early to talk about forgiveness. Then he simply asked when he could pick up his things. "What are you yelling about, Jenna? Where'd you see your stuff? I bought it all, and you're not getting anything from me, you heard me." "You bastard, live in what you can carry. I'd rather give your stuff to the homeless." Robert had almost no money left. He had to make do with pasta, and he wanted to eat good food. How did he get used to living with Jenna? I really wanted to go to a restaurant. What to do? Jenna would probably file for divorce. Maybe even find herself a new rich mom. At the thought of starting all over again, Robert cringed at the thought of how hard it was to woo rich women. At the very least, you'd need a decent closet. And money for the first time to make a splash. That's exactly what Robert didn't have. Looking for a job. Yeah, I guess there's nowhere to go. I'm gonna have to take whatever job comes back. Now was not the time to choose. Coming home from work in the evenings, Jenna walked around the empty apartment. There was nothing to occupy himself. The pain from the betrayal had not subsided had Sam been home. She would not be alone. It would have been possible to chat with her son, to go out with him, after all. But the woman had deprived herself of that too, because of Robert. Loneliness ate her up inside, just like my pain never goes away. For divorce from Robert, Jenna filed immediately the day after catching her husband with this girl. And that it didn't make her feel any better, the divorce wasn't until a month later. It was hard for Jenna to imagine how she would meet Robert. As long as she didn't get hysterical and curse him. That was the last thing she should do. It would give away her weakness. She'd have to try to stay calm. Jenna. It seemed that her husband would keep trying to contact her, begging for forgiveness. But a week had passed, and her husband had called only once, and that was about thinnings. Did he really not care? In the woman's head came up terrible pictures, and how he now lives with that young girl. And that made it even more painful. But Sam had a completely different life. The boy loved living in the village. And it would be more accurate to say at his grandmother's place in the city. Of course, it was more interesting, but there was no grandmother there. But now Sam was really happy. For the first time in his life, he wanted to come home from school. He knew he was welcome and loved there. And even if there weren't even 10 people in his class, but they were all friends, many of whom the boy had made friends with over the summer. And also in the village there was Emily, unapproachable classmate Emily, and Sam did not know what to do to make friends with her. He liked her very much. She, like Sam in the village, came from the city, but unlike the boy together with his parents. They decided to create a farm to the local guys Emily treated with caution, and Sam in general treated so dearly, since everyone considered him a bully. But over time, Sam found an approach to the unapproachable girl. All these experiences gave the boy's life a special meaning. And he tried to behave more restrained, more mature. When he came up with an idea, the first thing he thought of was how his grandmother would feel about it. Would she be upset? He tried hard not to add to her excitement, so as not to cause another attack of pain in his heart. The boy denied himself many pranks, but it didn't make life any less interesting. Today Sam flew home as if on wings. Stetka let him walk her home. The boys threw envious glances in his direction. When Sam came out of school, he defiantly took his backpack from the net and carried it himself. But no one teased him. Local boys since the summer had imbued respect to the bully Wise for his desperate character. The boy was in such a hurry to tell his grandmother about Emily that he did not notice anything in his way. And when he burst into the kitchen, he became like a stumbling block, unable to utter a word. Mom was sitting at the table, drinking tea and cake as if nothing had happened. "Hi, Sam. How glad I am that you're back." The woman rose, intending to get up from her seat. But the boy involuntarily floated backwards at this movement. Jenna frowned and sat back in her seat again. "Why did you come here?" roughly asked Sam, afraid that his mom had come to get him. "To visit. Why can't I?" She raised her voice. "Jenna, take it easy. Why don't you give him a kiss or something? It's been a month, hasn't it?" Kelly frowned. "I don't think my son's very happy to see me." "What did you expect him to do? Throw himself around your neck? The kid hasn't had much fun living with you these last few years." "Oh, okay. What's past is past. What's there to remember? Sit down with the chain. I'll pour you some tea and have some cake before it gets cold." "I'll eat in my room," answered Sam, and putting a few pieces on a plate, left. Jenna looked after her son with resentment. Not right away. Jenna comforted her daughter Kelly. It is clear that Sam is still very angry with you. But it's temporary. He's mellow. Wouldn't it hurt you to apologize to him? Tell me you know who took the money. Yeah, that's what I wanted to do. But he shrugged it off. He's like a hedgehog with needles coming right out. But that means you'll have to come here more often. Sam will get used to you. He'll realize that you've changed and he'll move away. Now that you've finally woken up and chased away your Alfonso, life can take a different course. I'm getting old, and as you know, I'm sick. You gain your son's trust back, and he'll come back to you. If things work out between you two, I'll be happy. Although I won't hide it, I'm really enjoying my life. It's like I've lost a decade, and it's been really hard. According to one, very hard, sighed Jenna, lowering her eyes. In your case, Jenna, loneliness is good for you. You've finally realized what a fruit your hubby is. By the way, how's the divorce going? You're a free woman now. No mom. Robert didn't show up in court. The hearing was postponed for a month. Why? Obviously, he's stalling for time, not children, not property. It's not a big deal if you want to, and it can be done quickly. Are you marking again? No, Mom, we're getting divorced in a month. I just wanted him to show up in court. I wanted to look into his shameless eyes. Well, I'll see it in a month. Then we'll get divorced. Mom, to be honest, I came here for Sam. I wanted to take him home, but he's fleeing from me like the devil from an incense. He does. What did you want? I told you not to do it all at once. You should have thought before when you changed a boy for a man, but now he's hurt, and I understand. The boy's heart is ice-crusted, and it takes time for it to thaw. Take a leave of absence from work. Move in with us. You might find your son will be attracted to you. Oh, I don't know, I'll think about it. Maybe after the divorce, Jenna left her mother with a stone in her heart. At the very last minute, she took Sam's things out of the car. The woman hoped to the last that they wouldn't have to be left behind. She really wanted to return to the city with him. And Sam tried to show with all his appearance that he had no desire to communicate with this woman, to apologize to his son for his unfounded suspicions. Jenna never found the courage, although she went to the village with a firm intention to do so. Early the next morning, they all left the house together. Sam was going to school, and Jenna had to go back to town. It wasn't a long way. Stepping out into the yard, Jenna barreled closer to her son and pecked him on the cheek. For the first time in a long time, anyone who let the mother do that, she immediately ran to her lessons, waved to her grandmother. Jenna's journey was going to be a difficult one. An empty apartment and anguish for Robert awaited her in the city. As much as she didn't want to admit it to herself, she missed this man. Waking up and falling asleep, all her thoughts were only about him. After all, in addition to the treason in their lives was a lot of pleasant moments. Evenings together, his tenderness in the bedroom. Coffee in bed in the morning, which her husband sometimes. Memories of infidelity still caused Jenna searing pain. Questions remained unanswered. Did Robert ever love her at all? Or did he just live with Jenna because it was convenient? Was it a one-time affair, or did he cheat systematically? But most of all, Jenna worried about who her husband was living with now, alone or with that girl of hers. This thought turned the woman on to such an extent that she couldn't stand it and hired a private detective. He had to find out where and with whom her husband was still living. She couldn't just call Robert, and he didn't, which pissed Jenna off. When in a couple of days, the detective reported on the work done and exhaled with relief when she learned that Robert lived alone in a rented apartment. And what's more, the man got a job as a sales consultant at an appliance store. It's not unusual for a job, but Jenna was relieved to hear that. And their divorce trial was coming up. And Jenna believed that this time Robert would show up. That's when she could look into his shameless eyes, no matter how much all of nature resisted it. Then Robert had to get a job, something to live on. Before he got the job, he checked out the store where he'd gotten the job. And the director was a woman, of course, not as well off as Jenna before and older, but unmarried. And Robert liked that, and he wasn't in a position to choose. He was determined to make the principal fall in love with him, and he was succeeding. He simply forgot about the trial because he was busy with other things. In his dreams, he was already living off the principal. But unfortunately, Roberto all ended before it began on their first date in the restaurant. When the bill came, Robert was sure that the lady would pay for it. But the Ta, realizing this, frowned. Pay his bill, of course she did, because the amount was not insignificant. Robert did not deny himself anything in the choice of food, and the man had no money, but warned that the debt would grow out of his salary. After that evening, the store manager didn't even want to look in Robert's direction, quickly realizing what he was. The man was worried about being asked to leave his job. Robert reproached himself for the fact that during the time he had been living with Jenna, he had become completely confused. Debts were mounting like a snowball, and the rich ladies did not want to peck at his bait. In the end, Robert completely despaired and came to the conclusion that he has only one way. By all means to return his ex-wife, even if it will have to be humiliated. Several times Robert wanted to go to Jenna, to wait for her near the entrance, to lie at her feet, but the man kept himself from this act. It would take time for her to fully realize how hard it was to be alone. There was little chance of finding a replacement for Robert at her age and with her looks. And she had to realize that. Meeting at the courthouse, Robert prepared to get a thorough haircut and changed his clothes with the money he had borrowed again. The man arrived at the courthouse an hour and a half before the appointed time. He wandered outside the building with the intention of intercepting Jenna still on the street. And then she appeared. Robert saw his wife's cheeks redden when she saw him as she got out of the car. So she cared. She still cared. Robert quickly portrayed a pained expression on his face. Jenna slowly walked up the steps to her husband, standing near the door, and didn't know where to start the conversation. But he did it all for her. Jenna. Robert held out his arms to his wife, as if wanting to hug her, but immediately lowered them, pulling himself away. How did I miss you? Why didn't you come to the first meeting? Trying to appear indifferent, asked Jenna. I couldn't divorce you. I still can't. I still don't understand how we got to this point because of a fleeting mistake. To ruin our love. I love you. I've always loved you, Jenna. Yeah, relax, but that's okay. Haven't you ever made a mistake in your life? Everyone should have a chance at forgiveness. Can one stupid thing ruin all our happy years? So you call it just fleeting foolishness. He who loves doesn't bring any girls into the house. When he loves others, he doesn't look at them. For example, I've never thought of looking at any other man, because nobody wants you for nothing. The man's mind flashed as he prepared to execute a pre-planned move. One more minute of embarrassment and hello, a life of contentment again. The man fell to his knees right on the dirty tiles. He covered his face with his hands, pretending to cry. I'm sorry, I beg you. Forgive me, Jenna, and I can't do this without you at all. I'm going to die. Robert whispered, looking at the woman's reaction through his fingers. And that's when the real tears started to flow. Not Robert's. Jenna did. Robert, get up. She held out her hand to her husband. Get up, please. Let's go to the car. We'll discuss it there. In the end, neither spouse showed up for the second court hearing. Passers-by looked reproachfully at the car, in which in broad daylight kissed not old couple. Jenna did not go to work that day. She and her husband returned home to their house. There were tears, forgiveness, passionate confessions, and a day spent in the bedroom. Robert swore and swore that he would never look at anyone else in his life but his favorite and only woman. But more than anything, Jenna was afraid to confess everything to her mother, that she and Robert had reconciled. She knew exactly how she would react, and only when her mother told her on the phone that they were steppin' and planning to go to town to buy stationery. Jenna had to confess everything. Oh, you're a fool, Jenna. Oh, what an idiot. I was hoping you'd wisen up, but no, you're back to your old ways. You're not trying to get along with your son. He was asking about you the other day, by the way. Now I don't even know how to tell him you're back with your husband. The guy's gonna be upset again. He was planning on spending his vacation with you. You're a terrible mother. Jenna threw Kelly a furious look and disconnected the phone. Time flew by very quickly, and Steph graduated 9th grade. All grown-up boy. It is necessary to decide how to study further, but I didn't want to leave my grandmother alone. Her health never stopped deteriorating, and they'd been through too much together. rather visited them now very often. And a few times she even took Kelly to the hospital. But in all this time, Sam had never regretted for a second that he had decided to move to the village. Those were the best years of his life. At graduation, he was the most stylish. And that was thanks to his mother. She bought him a suit, and it suited the young man perfectly. She generally pledged her guilt with things all these years. It was all she could give him. She and his grandmother had never needed money. But back home in the city, Sam had never once come home, refusing to spend time in his stepfather's company. Into the balloon and poster-decorated auditorium. By the hand was Sam entered a beautiful girl on whom all the village boys looked back. And not only village boys. But only since her arrival in the village, Emily had been friends only with Sam. And by 9th grade, that friendship had grown into something more. Twirling in the graduation waltz, Olia smiled at Sam. But he remained frowning. "Step, what's the matter? Are you angry about something?" she asked her friend right after the dance. "We've been looking forward to this day." "Yes, we have," Sam replied cheerfully. "Of course, we've been waiting for the light. Don't mind me. It's just that I realize I'm going to have to leave my grandmother. The thought doesn't let me rest." "Have you decided where you're going to go?" "Yeah, I'm going to be an auto mechanic." "Isn't that easier for you? You've been wanting to be a teacher for a long time. I like cars and I like to work on them. But we're not going to stop seeing you in town," Emily smiled. "Yes, of course not. That goes without saying. My mom insists that I live with them indecently. Like I'll be living in a dormitory when she has such a big apartment. And frankly, I don't want to. You can understand her. She's a mom. Maybe she was wrong once, but it's time to forget all the offenses. It's actually more convenient to live in an apartment." She's right. Sam entered his mother's apartment with great reluctance. Until the last time he was leaning towards the hostel, but his grandmother talked him out of it. He went there with a suitcase, planning to live there. That time to be trained in the college, as the guy did not plan, he entered the auto mechanic. This profession was really to his liking. "Sam, don't be stupid," Kelly kept telling him. "Your mother has a big apartment. Can you live in your own room? You're family after all, and you've had enough of shunning each other. It's time to mend your relationship. I'm not getting any younger, and my health. Well, you know what I mean. When I'm gone, Mom will be the only person you'll have left." Sam grimaced at his grandmother's words. He'd always didn't like it if she talked about the time when she would be gone. Except that Sam's grandmother didn't tell him everything. She kept silent about the fact that his mother did not offer her son to live with her out of the goodness of her heart. Let's say that she didn't even want to, because her husband was categorically against such a neighborhood. They even had a couple of scandals about it. But Kelly insisted on it, saying that the son cannot skulk in the dormitory, when the mother, albeit unlucky, has a large, spacious apartment. But Sam, against his wishes, entered the apartment, from which he had moved out with great joy a few years ago. Beaver didn't even say hello to his stepson, he only mumbled, "You showed up, you didn't get sick. It's a pity that no one even had time to miss you." He said that, and Sam went to his bedroom to make himself comfortable in his former room. And from there I heard my stepfather, not even trying to speak more quietly. He was giving his mother a hard time. I brought him in. "Our peaceful life is over. Why did you bring him here? Let him live in the dorm." Sam heard his mother's answer as she spoke very quietly. That's why the guy never found out that it was all started by his grandmother, wanting to make up mother and son. Sam, by habit left from his school days, woke up early in the morning before the start of classes at the technical college was still a couple of days away. But today Emily was coming to town. Sam wanted to meet his girlfriend and help with settling in. The boy was washing his face. And when he heard the conversation in raised tones in the kitchen, his mom and stepdad were arguing again. "Jenna, you make me laugh. What to do with these pennies? Not even enough for a coffee, and I have to change the oil in my car. And the pads need to be checked. In short, I need to get my car serviced. Robert, I already told you that you forgot about the problems at work," exhaled Jenna tiredly. "I'm afraid to imagine how much I'll make this month. The new boss has already hinted that much less. So I need to tighten my belts and start saving. The service can wait." Jenna had never been a supervisor, but she was a top-notch specialist in her field. She could easily fill in for a translator, occasionally doing accounting transactions. The previous owner of the firm for whom she worked very much appreciated her abilities and diligence and expressed this gratitude financially. Except that, unfortunately, he recently decided to go abroad and sold his company. And with the new owner, Jenna's relations did not work out. Seeing the size of her salary, his eyes went to his forehead from surprise. He immediately indicated that there would be no more such a salary, and if she wasn't satisfied, he wouldn't keep anyone. Jenna had made repeated attempts to explain this to Robert, but her husband didn't want to hear it, much less cut back on spending. How long can we live like this? He was indignant. If you can't continue to support our lifestyle, just say so, then I'll have to get a job. I would have gone before, but you don't want to. I'll drive people around in a cab today, day and night. We'll see a lot less of each other, but at least I won't have to squeeze every penny out of you for necessities. Well, all right, Robert. Jenna raised her palms conciliatorily. Take it. How much do you need there for this service? The woman avoided any talk of work from Robert, especially when he started talking about cabs. And Robert knew it well. Who would he be driving drunk girls around at night? At the mere thought of it, women and in her head drew horrible pictures of these girls seducing her lover. And they would because he was so handsome. In the end, Jenna, with a heavy heart again, laid out the amount that her husband demanded, realizing that now she cannot afford it at all. This is exactly the scene Sam was watching. He entered the kitchen and wished everyone a good morning, and started frying eggs for breakfast. Jenna hurried off to work, and only Robert and Sam remained in the kitchen. An awkward silence hung in the air. Robert drummed his fingers nervously on the stairs, humming the rest of his coffee, and every now and then catching disapproving glances from his stepson. Sam, who had grown up long ago and now looked at many things differently. I couldn't take it. Until now, begging money from his mother has not tried to work. And you're not mixed up. Don't go where you're not asked and for the future. Don't come into the kitchen while I'm here. Know your place. I see you're feeling like a master. You'll get tired in the dorm. Sam was basically ready for something like that, so he turned off the gas, slowly wiped his hands with a towel, and turned to him. The guy's face had a snide grin on it as he saw his stepson approaching. Robert's face changed. Not only was the boy half a head taller than the man, but he was also physically fit, judging by the breadth of his shoulders and the muscles in his arms. All on as gently as possible took his stepfather, and pulled upward by the neck, forcing him to rise to his feet. And Robert did not resist. His arms hung listlessly along his body, and his eyes gave away fear. The boy came close to his stepfather's face and looked down at him and whispered, "That was the last time I heard you say that to me, and if I hear you say it again, you'll regret it. My arms and legs are broken. I'll tell my mom you fell, unless, of course, you want to get hurt more. And as for me living here, I'll tell you something. I don't live at your place, and it's not your apartment, and it's not even my mom's apartment. My grandmother bought it. So unlike you, I have every right to live here. You, on the other hand, have no right to live here. From now on, you will be as quiet as a mouse in my presence. Do you understand?" Sam shook his hand on Robert's throat, and he jerked aside and coughed. The guy, smiling, kept his eyes on him. I didn't hear the answer. Yeah, I got it. The man nodded his head cowardly, not raising his eyes at Sam. Even though Robert's rage was raging in his soul, he realized that he was losing physically. In front of him stood not the same snot-nosed boy that had left this apartment like a cornered animal a few years ago. Far from it. After that, Robert's demeanor changed dramatically. The man began to behave much more quietly, did not beg for money from his wife, but contented himself with the sums she gave him. Jenna also noticed that Robert wasn't picking on her son like he used to. It took a long time for the woman to get a hold of Robert. What was going on? The husband kept his mouth shut and only exploded once. Your son is no longer a troubled teenager. No, he's a real criminal. Hear me out. Jenna, this is not going to end well. When Robert was saying all that stuff to his face, it was just the two of them in the apartment. But at his last words, there was a sound, turning it in the key lock. It was Sam returning from school. Robert immediately fell silent, and Jenna could not get another word out of her husband. But it couldn't be said that the situation. Jenna was upset, on the contrary. This state of affairs suited her completely. The house was quiet. The husband had calmed down. Sam only came home at night. He spent all his free time either with his girlfriend or working part-time. And his girlfriend, Jenna, didn't know anything except that her name was Emily. And she was studying to be a teacher to bring her to visit and introduce her to her mother. The son refused. Jenna sincerely did not understand the reasons for such behavior. But she did not worry about it for a long time, because there were more and more problems at work. The new director nagged her on anything on the glass, and with each new credit, cut the woman's salary. Jenna even considered changing jobs, but other places offered even less. The quality of life in the family had deteriorated significantly. Robert was dissatisfied and showed it with all his appearance. But he didn't say anything, and he did not bring up the subject of work anymore, being content with what he had. In fact, the man was waiting. He was waiting for that happy moment when Sam would leave them. Wouldn't he live with his mother all the time? He's only got 3 years of school. Maybe he'll think of something sooner. What if he got married? Robert quietly hated Sam, but there was nothing he could do about it. The boy had scared his stepfather pretty badly the first day he'd been here. Sam was happy. His studies were easy for him. He saw Emily every day. The only thing that marred everything was his grandmother's health. Kelly, he visited her every weekend and saw her weakening. Hospitalizations were no longer helping. Doctors did not give encouraging prognoses, hinting that with such a diagnosis she had already lived a long time. And now she had to be prepared for anything. And Kelly was the only one who understood where she got the strength to last so long. Sam. She had made a promise to herself once that she would raise this boy by all means. She was able to keep that promise. The boy is big. By the end of his studies, he and Emily were planning a wedding, and after his diploma, he was to be drafted into the Army. The young thought for a long time, weighing all the pros and cons, and still they came to the conclusion that it would be better to get married after the Army. "You'll definitely wait for me." I loved him, as if in jest, and actually a little worried. To ask his girlfriend Sam. Emily at such moments always took offense. "Okay, stop it. Even if you serve 10 years, I'll still wait for you. I'd wait for you all my life. And let's not bring this up again." And 3 months before the end of school, Sam got an unexpected call from Nancy. Kelly, Sam's roommate. "Come over here." Kelly had gotten sick. She called during class, and Sam snapped. "I don't remember mumbling to the class teacher about Grandma." She just nodded her head. "Go, Sam. Of course you do." Ran into the house. He saw Kelly lying on the bed, covered with a blanket up to her chin. It took the boy's heart to see how thin she had become, all dried up from illness. And the look? How was this look different from the usual, sharp and commanding gaze of his grandmother? "Grandma, my dear, how are you?" "Why so frightening?" "Why are you lying down?" "Sam, I don't have the strength to get up anymore." The woman spoke quietly, with a gasp. Sam went out to Nancy's neighbor, also an old woman, who was tending to the kitchen. "Kelly, here's some soup from the book. She'll be easier to eat." The doctor was a womanizer. "What does he say?" "What can I say?" "The neighbor said it's useless to hospitalize her. We just have to wait. Our Kelly won't be able to get up. It's up to God. Maybe he gave her a week. Maybe he gave her a year. You never know. You have to take care of your grandmother. I've been working on it for a couple days. But I can't do it. I'm not young myself, you see, and my husband's nagging me that I've neglected the whole household." Sam had a lump in her throat. "I wanted to throw up and throw down. I wanted to cut off a part of my heart and put it on my grandmother's chest so that she would get out of bed and live for a long time." Met him at the gate, staring into the distance with her gaze. But he realized that would never happen again. And Jenna got another reprimand from her bosses and was already pretty angry. And now Sam was calling and calling. Even though she'd been dropping his calls, the disgruntled chief jumped on the woman. "Who keeps calling you in the middle of the day? Go answer it. I suspect there's something more important than business." Leaving the office, Jenna irritably called her son Sam back. "If I'm picking up, it means I'm busy. What's up?" "Mom, I brought Grandma over. She's not feeling well." It took Jenna a moment to realize the meaning of her son's words. "What do you mean? You brought her to us? What are the bedridden for now?" "I'm telling you, Grandma needs care. She can't get up. I couldn't leave her in the village. There's no one to look after her. So I hired a car and we brought her here." Jenna ran away from work without even setting off. She was afraid to imagine the state of her husband. And Robert stood there like a thunderstorm. "Jenna, why don't you explain what's going on here? It's bad enough we have your son. He's brought in a sick grandmother. Who's going to take care of her?" At that time, Sam came out of the room where the grandmother was placed. Jenna, leaving her husband unanswered, immediately attacked her son. "Indeed. Sam, what were you thinking when you made that decision? Why didn't you ask us? I'm at work all day. Who's going to take care of her? Especially since you're going to be in the army soon." "Mom, so we'll hire a nurse." The boy answered nonchalantly. "With what money?" Robert got upset. Yes, supported her husband Jenna. "In fact, you know that money is not the same now as it used to be. Why do I have to pay for a nurse? I'm saving up for the wedding. You know I work part-time. I can pay for the first time with this money. And at the end of the day, how much do you give your boyfriend every day? A babysitter costs a lot less." There was no point in arguing. What's done is done. And Kelly was left to live in her daughter's apartment. Soon Sam was drafted, and the old woman was left in the care of her daughter and son-in-law. One day, the caregiver left the door of her room open when she left. Kelly overheard a conversation between the daughter and her husband. Big tears rolled down the woman's face. "How much longer are we going to put up with your mom in our apartment? You can feel it, you can smell it here. It stinks of old age medicine." The apartments turned into an almshouse. "Jenna, I can't take it anymore." "Don't exaggerate, please. The nurse is very neat, doesn't smell a thing." "You don't say." "Yes, it does. You just can't smell it. You don't stay in the apartment all day like I do. Besides, there are strangers in here all the time. And I'm telling you, let's put your mother in a nursing home. She'll be fine there. That's where they take care of them." "Robert, how do you figure that? Sam's only been in the army a week. He paid for a caregiver 3 months in advance. What am I gonna tell him when he calls me? Don't say anything, you'll say it's fine. I have to tell him everything. He did his time, we canceled the contract, and we'll get the money back." Kelly, even lying in bed in this room, felt it. How did your son-in-law's behavior change? With Sam going into the army, the man immediately began to pressure his wife, often raising his voice at her. He reproached Jenna for the fact that she began to earn little, and every night nagged her about being in their apartment lying mothers. The conversation between the spouses continued. Kelly noticed with alarm that her daughter was beginning to give in. "Well, I don't know, Robert, I don't know, but maybe you're right. Maybe Mom really would be better off in a nursing home. Honestly, I can't tell you anything. Besides, it's not something that can be done quickly. We have to find the right place, do the paperwork." As soon as Jenna said those words, it turned out that her husband had already done it. "And I've already chosen everything. Here, look," he grabbed his phone and began to poke in Jenna's face the open page on the internet. "See? The government facility is paid for from the patient's own pension. And there's a list of documents too. You can get them together in a few days if you want to." "Robert." "But it's not even in our town," Jenna exclaimed. "It's at least an 8-hour drive." "So what?" Her husband looked at her in bewilderment. "So I can't visit my mom with my job. The chief's already picking on me. Do you know how busy I am? Why would you visit her? Did you visit her in the village? She's just an old woman lying there." "Well, I don't know." Jenna hesitated. Although even Kelly, hearing the whole conversation, realized that her daughter had already made a decision. And when Sam will call her mom, she is still in her right mind. "Then I won't be able to hide anything from him. So don't give the old lady your cell phone. Why would she need it at the nursing home? There's no reason to call her. The staff will call us without her. That's exactly the kind of staff Mom can ask for a phone. Or are you kidding me? You really think the old lady can remember everything by heart in her condition? Kelly wiped the tears running down her cheeks with exasperation. And here Vidic is very wrong. She remembered her grandson's number even in her sleep, and she wasn't going to forget it. She had a heart problem, not a head problem. But at the same time, Kelly realized that she would not call Sam and would not complain. Why would she? What could he possibly change being away from her? It would only make him nervous, twitchy. Let the boy serve himself in peace. Nursing home means nursing home. On the one hand, it might be better there than here. Listening to Robert's constant tantrums and seeing the slanted, disgruntled looks of her daughter. Sam was lucky. Thanks to his excellent physical training, he got to serve in the Air Force. I must say that the guy himself dreamed of it and asked for it at the military enlistment office. Of course, the service did not seem like a honey. At first, it was very hard. Daily march. Throws training. In the evening, Sam was so exhausted that he fell on the bed and tore off without hind legs, not forgetting before that to call Emily and grandmother. Telephones were allowed in the unit, but only simple push buttons. And it was possible to use them once a day in the evenings only for communication with relatives. But for some reason recently, dialing his grandmother, the guy heard short beeps. So Sam dialed his mom. "What's up with Grandma?" "Nothing, everything is the same." Jenna answered reluctantly. "Yes, we disconnected her phone. She's getting weaker, and it's very hard for her to talk." "No, Sam, I can't put her on the phone right now. I'm not home." After the conversation with his mother, Sam felt a bitter residue on his soul. It was clear that she was being dark. This was evident from her slurred voice and her reluctance to talk about her grandmother. He shared these concerns with his girlfriend in a phone conversation. Emily was not lazy and went to Sam's house, although the girl did not want to meet his mom. But the girl herself had a strong attachment to Kelly, in front of her eyes that passed Svita's school years. Besides, Sam was nervous. I wanted to calm him down by telling him that everything was fine with his grandmother. But it didn't work. Step by step, Mom together with stepfather did not let the light into the apartment. "What kind of inspections?" arrogantly inquired Jenna. "It's not an inspection. I just wanted to visit." Kelly confused Emily under the woman's appraising gaze. "There's nothing to visit. Mom's not ready for a visit." Jenna cut Jenna off and slammed the door in Svatina's face. When this became known to Sam, he had a big fight with his mother on the phone, but there was nothing he could do. The unit in which he served was located far away from his native place. It was impossible to go back there for a leave of absence. So he served, being satisfied with his mother's reluctance and reservations without contact with his grandmother. Sam served almost half a year, becoming stronger endurance in the evenings. The guy no longer fell off his feet as the first time of service. And one evening, when there was still half an hour of free time left before lights out, he decided to call Emily as usual and turned on his simple phone. This phone was to be turned off throughout the day. The guy didn't have time to dial his sweater. The screen popped up with a message from the service provider 12 missed from an unknown number. At first, Sam wanted to ignore the text message, but then something niggled in his chest. 12 missed calls. Someone wanted to call him very badly. What if it was Grandma? And Sam was kind of right. "Oh, it's Sam, yeah." The voice on the phone was a woman's voice, not old. "Sam, I called you today for your grandmother. She's very bad, feels like she doesn't have long left, and she really wants to say goodbye to you. This is some kind of mistake. You got it wrong. Why didn't Mom call me herself? Who are you?" "I'm an orderly at the nursing home where your grandmother is." "I don't know about your mom. I've never seen her here. It's been like 5 months since we've had her here." Sam's hand that held the phone began to tremble. With his other hand, he clutched his head. "This is a mistake. This is a mistake. It just can't be," he mumbled. "My grandmother can't be in a nursing home." The unit commander looked at the soldier in front of him with bewilderment. "What vacation? What week? What are you talking about? You're not supposed to get a weekend leave at the most." "I have to. Stubborn Sam. I don't know who needs what. Where's your company getting ready to jump? Why aren't you with them? I'm marching to my company. And if you don't let me go, I'll run away." Desperately declared Sam, "Court-martial me, do what you want, but I'll run away." The chief of the unit only now noticed the state of morale in which the soldier was. Despair, close to hysteria. That's what he said. "Come on, tell me what happened there." When Sam told in a broken voice about the call from the nursing home, the man with the military bearing looked at him carefully. "That's where you should have started. What do you think we are? Not human beings here." The chief jerked open the desk drawer and, pulling out a blank form, began to write something on it. And in 5 minutes, Sam was already jumping out of his office, clutching this piece of paper tightly, just to make it. Only to be in time, like an incantation the guy repeated to himself, "Grandma, wait for me. I'm coming." Kelly was buried in her home village. Sam was in charge of transporting the body and organizing the funeral. It was a rainy day. The sky had been overcast since morning. The rain poured and poured. It seemed that the sky itself did not want to stop crying. Baba Nancy was muttering to us alone, standing in a tight bunch of villagers. The villagers all came, in spite of the miserable weather. Kelly, but respected and loved here. Sam stood straight as a taut string with his head uncovered. Streams oozed from his short hair, mixed with tears. The boy watched muffled as the beaten red velvet coffin was lowered into the damp black pit. Close by, clinging tightly and holding his hand, stood Emily. She was sobbing in her voice, as were many of the villagers. Only Jenna could not squeeze a tear out of herself standing all alone apart from everyone else. She tangled in her drenched cloak with irritation peering out from under the umbrella. At the mourners, Kelly's sky. The villagers squinted at the woman with distaste, and the sun's gaze burned with hatred. Jenna felt uncomfortable under the red stairs and wished only one thing, that it would all be over quickly. It would have been better if she hadn't come at all, but that would have been unseemly. Not a single person from the locals moved from their seats until the very end. It was only when the last wreath was laid on the earthen mound that people began to slowly disperse. They shaved, quietly conversing, remembering the deceased and with kind words. Sam, supported by his entourage, was the last to leave. The girl stroked him, helped him, and repeated, "Nothing, Sam, nothing." Grandmother was in agony, and now she is well. And it's very good that you had time to say goodbye. Yes, and Sam had time. Or rather, the grandmother, thanks to something incomprehensible that supported her all these years and was able to wait for her grandson. She was able to wait until the last thing she saw was her favorite face. And Sam had time to say words of gratitude to his grandmother for having her. After all, she was the one who had given him those happy years of his life. And that only thanks to her he didn't drink and didn't become a drug addict in some boarding school. "I love you, Grandma. You changed my attitude to life. I was a troubled teenager. Did you change that? You were never a troubled teenager." Breathing heavily, Kelly whispered, "It's your mother who's difficult. And it's my fault. And you were a good, kind, mischievous boy in every way. I have no regrets. I've lived a long enough life as it is. It's just a pity I won't be at your wedding to Emily. She's a very good girl. Take good care of her." Grandmother died quietly in her sleep, and Sam could not let go of her hand for a long time. Returning from the cemetery to Grandma's house, where everything reminded him of his native person, where the best years of his life had passed, Sam ran into his mother there. To all appearances, she was waiting for him. Sam, trying to speak confidently, addressed her son. "I wanted to talk to you. When you serve, where will you go back to this house?" "That's what you're worried about, Mom. Will I come back to you?" "I wanted to talk to you too, but about something else. How dare you send Grandma to a nursing home? What was I supposed to do? The nurse only worked until 6:00 p.m., and I sometimes worked longer than that. I just didn't have the physical strength to get up to see her at night. Robert and I decided that a special place would be better for Mom." "You and Robert decided?" Sam shouted. Emily, who had gone into another room so as not to interfere with the conversation between mother and son, quickly came back and took the boy's hand in a soothing gesture. But it didn't help. Sam continued to scream. "So that's what you decided. Have you been to that almshouse yourself? Did you even realize where you sent your grandmother? Did you see the conditions there? The only normal person there was the nurse." The rest of the staff is rude and sensual. The stench is unbearable. The care of the bedridden is done out of hand. And I am bitter to tears that my grandmother spent her last days. This is not how she deserved it. Who cares? Jenna snapped at me. She was lying down anyway. The difference, you say, is huge. Maybe Grandma would have lived longer at home, and maybe she would have waited for me to come home from the army. I'd take her. I wouldn't leave her with you for a minute. You, Sam, were gasping for air, holding back sobs. I used to try to make excuses for you. I used to think it was Robert who was leading you astray. Now, I don't think that anymore. I don't know who's worse. You or your hubby? Grandma and I were always strangers to him, and he acted like one. But you, Grandma wasn't a stranger to you. I've forgiven you for a lot of things. Mom, you did. I forgave you for disliking me, even when you disowned me. But I can't forgive your grandmother. You hear me? I will never forgive you for Grandma. What are you even doing here? In the house of the man you betrayed. Get out of here. You have no right to be here. Sam, what did you call for, Jenna? Where am I going now? Out at night in this weather? I won't get into town till morning. I was thinking of spending the night. Don't even think about it. Go, I said. Sam took a step toward his mother with such a frantic gleam in his eyes that the woman was frightened. No, she knew her son would never raise a hand against her. But that hatred glittering in his gaze. Not a word, not saying another. Jenna sprinted out of the house into the still, unconverted downpour. She remembered she'd forgotten her umbrella, but she didn't go back for it. Covering her head with the palms of her hands, she ran to her car in knee-deep water and splattered Shay with mud. Slammed the car door behind her. Jenna pulled out a tissue from the glove compartment and began wiping her wet face. Then she looked angrily at the windows of the house and whispered something. The son of a bitch. And this house is not yours. I'll inherit it like a daughter. After the army, you'll have nowhere to go back to. Then we'll see how you sing. We have to sell the apartment, said Jenna Robert confidently. There's a serious problem with your head. You need a good checkup. Jenna, despite the terrible headache, jerked violently. You're out of your mind. The apartment is all we have left. The car's gone. After the accident, it's beyond repair. That rainy night after her mother's funeral, driving home on a wet road. Angry at her son, freaking out and on the gas. Jenna was involved in a car accident. The woman failed to control her car and went off the road. The car flipped over several times, but strangely enough, the woman herself was barely hurt. The hospital did not find any serious injuries. But only after that Ira began to have severe headaches, the cause of which could not be found by any doctor. All of them spread their hands, and the headache got worse and worse. It made Jenna absent-minded, could not cope with her usual work. In the end, the woman was asked to quit. In principle, she had been waiting for this from her always dissatisfied boss. He just needed an excuse, and he found it. Finding herself without a job, the woman realized with horror that she and Robert have nothing to live on. All her accounts had long since been emptied, and she was unable to find a new job in such a state. And she was on powerful painkillers. Nevertheless, when her husband talked about selling the apartment, she lashed out at him with indignation. No. Why? Robert shrugged. Shrug. It can't go on like this. We need to find out what's causing these pains you're having. You need a checkup at a paid clinic. We'll live on rent for a few months. It won't be a big deal. Then you'll inherit, sell your mother's house, cash in her savings, and buy another apartment. You know how much houses are worth in this village now, don't you? Indeed, as it turned out, real estate in Kelly Village, and especially the plots of land, were in demand and fetching a decent price. The village became popular with the oligarchs because they built mansions there for summer residences. And the land was bought up by a local farmer. He's been busy expanding. This farmer was the father of what Jenna, of course, could not know, not being interested in his son's girlfriend. Jenna was counting on that inheritance. In addition to the house, Kelly had some cash savings. She felt fine for now, deserved her huge plot of onions, and turned in that crop later. A long time ago, it was this hard-earned money that Kelly had used to buy her pregnant daughter an apartment. But after that, Jenna knew her mother had continued to grow onions. Jenna wondered if Robert might be right. The only way out now was to sell the apartment. There's nothing to live on, and these headaches were driving her crazy. Maybe a good fee-for-service clinic will determine their cause. Robert's persuasion of his wife to sell the apartment had its own motives. First of all, he wanted to get some money out of it, at least some of it for the first time. That's one. And secondly, Robert's girlfriend got pregnant and demanded money for abortion and moral compensation from him. She demanded it brutally, threatening that otherwise she would go to Jenna and tell her everything about their relationship. Roberts was going to quit moneyless, and now Jenna and such, but not right now. First, he has to talk her into selling the condo and waiting for the inheritance to snatch his piece of the pie. After a while, Jenna gave in to her husband's entreaties and agreed to sell the apartment. She didn't care anymore, but only to quickly begin to examine and find out what was wrong with her. A good apartment near the city center was sold quickly. The money from the deal was transferred to the card Jenna PIN, the code of which Robert knew very well. And the first thing, the man decided to get rid of the annoying girlfriend, who blackmailed him. Now he would only give her money for an abortion. No moral indemnity. Early in the morning, Robert and Jenna left the small rental apartment they had rented after paying a couple months' rent in advance. They drove to the clinic for a consultation. When they got there, Robert left his wife waiting outside the doctor's office, telling her he was going out for coffee. The man left the clinic and dialed Julia, whom he had only been seeing for 2 months. She was the one who had threatened the man with her pregnancy. Arranging to meet near the clinic, Robert went there on foot. Julia stood near the entrance to the hypermarket with a frown on her face. "I hope you didn't just pull me out of work to get money." Only for the abortion, Robert cut Robert off. "No moral compensation, I will not pay you." The girl accepted it. "Aren't you afraid I'll go to your wife? Then you won't get that money either. It's your choice. Either you take the money for the abortion and disappear from my life, or you get nothing. Go to your wife. Go wherever you want. I'm gonna divorce her soon anyway." Jenna decided that Robert was probably not lying. He doesn't care about his wife. She realized that a long time ago. He'd better not screw her over at all. "We have to take at least this much. What's he offering?" Robert didn't realize that Julia was a fraud. Saying that she came home from work now, she was lying, of course. The girl had never worked a day in her life. She toured the cities and scammed rich suckers for dough. Using her appearance, it can be said that Robert came across his own copy only in female form. At first fashionably dressed and looking after himself, Robert seemed rich to Julia. And when she realized that he was just like herself, Julia decided that the wool from the lousy sheep was a piece of cake. So she typed in pregnancy. "There's an ATM in this store. Let's go." Robert rushed Julia, wanting to get rid of her as quickly as possible. The ATM was right in front of the exit of the hypermarket. The girl was hanging around while Robert was withdrawing money and saw the PIN code he was entering. Suddenly, Julia had a crazy idea in her head that she had wasted 2 months of her life on this jerk. She could have picked up a normal man during that time, and this one's throwing her a pathetic handout, especially since I'm from this town. I wasn't planning on leaving, and Robert doesn't know anything about her except a fake name. The girl watched carefully as Robert gestured carelessly as he slipped the card into his wallet and put it in the pocket of his fancy coat. "And you know what, Robert?" Julia softly sang out. "I'm very sorry things have come to this between us. I like you a lot." The girl took a step towards the man and hugged him languorously, whispering in his ear, "Goodbye. I had a very good time with you." Meanwhile, Julia's nimble fingers were fumbling in the pockets of that very fancy coat. Robert returned to the clinic outside the office, where Jenna had been sitting before was empty, which meant his wife had gone inside. "Hurry, this can't wait to end hard," Robert sighed. "Jesus, what kind of Jenna is this? The fool. How can I be sick of her? The brainless one has even lost her job. I'll wait for the inheritance and immediately part with her." The man sat outside the office to wait, but the wait was not long. 5 minutes later, the worried Jenna jumped out of the office with the phone in her hands. "Robert, what's wrong?" "I was talking to the doctor, and the alerts on my phone kept going off and on. I couldn't believe it at first. Look, my card is being charged, and it's supposedly being withdrawn from an ATM. Robert, where's the card? You have it, right? As Jenna and Robert walked into the very hypermarket where the ATM was located, Robert was terribly nervous. You bet he was. They had come here for a reason. They had a police officer with them, and they were coming to see the CCTV footage. Robert cursed Julia to himself. Not only had she stolen the card, but she had the sense to withdraw cash. Here too, as they say, without leaving the cash register. By the time of withdrawal, it was obvious that the girl waited only until Robert came out of the door and again rushed to the same ATM. The trio entered the security room, where the monitors glittered with bright evidence. They were receiving video from all the cameras installed in the huge hypermarket. The guard nodded in agreement upon hearing the policeman's request. Yes, of course. So you need yesterday? Can you tell me the time? Jenna took out her cell phone and said the time of the withdrawal. Robert's eyes flickered and the man fidgeted. No, there is no need to look directly from that time. The first time I withdrew the money, I didn't need to do something. He was embarrassed under his wife's inquisitive gaze. There's no need to look from this time. Let's look at the next withdrawals. Maybe I just dropped the card. Or maybe it was stolen from you, the policeman suggested. No way. Let's look at the time of your withdrawal. The camera near the ATM was installed very well and saw in detail how her husband came with the girl, withdrew the money, gave it to his companion. How after that they hugged each other, and it was clear from the first glance that there was more than just friendship between these two. Then they walked out of the door together, and a couple minutes later the girl returned. She had taken out the entire daily limit, and it wasn't small on this card. Jenna's card was a premium card. The police officer smirked. The picture of what had happened was perfectly clear to him. His mistress thought he hadn't given her enough money, and she had decided to take her own. Jenna, on the other hand, could not deny the obvious, either with a furious stare into the monitor screen. When on the screen Julia withdrew the last of what the ATM had given her and with a spectacular gait, stepped out of the camera's view, Jenna turned around sharply. Gathering from the gaze of Robert standing behind her, the man was not there, nor was he in the hypermarket itself. Robert had escaped in the first few frames. Well, are you going to write a statement or will you deal with it in a family way? The policeman grinned. Of course I will, snapped Jenna. Where's the family? Did you see that crook robbed my husband? She said goodbye to the policeman. Jenna hurried home, or rather, not home. She had no home now. There was only a rented apartment. She knew she'd catch Robert there. Where else would he go? The woman was not mistaken. The husband was there, busily packing his belongings into a suitcase. Bastard. Packing. Where are you going? Bastard? Where are you going? From what I understand, you broke up with your girlfriend. Why else would she pull the card from you? Like the last time she caught her husband in the act, Jenna couldn't help herself. Scoundrel, scoundrel, she piped up and began whipping Robert on the cheeks. And if the first couple of blows Robert missed from surprise, on the next swing he grabbed his wife's wrist and squeezed, causing pain. Enough, Robert shouted. It's clear enough. I'm leaving you. Jenna was taken aback. This was not what she had expected from her husband. The woman believed that he would crawl at her feet, apologize, like last time. And she knew she would forgive him again. How could she not? She couldn't be alone right now. Jenna pulled her hand out and spoke without the same intensity in her voice. Where are you going? Stay. I won't kick you out. I just know that from now on you won't get any more money from me. Robert exhausted himself and for the first time looked at his wife with a look in which he expressed his whole attitude toward her. It was an attitude he had been masking for years. It was contempt mixed with disgust. What are you talking about? She won't give me the money. Do you seriously expect me to stay with you on your terms? Yes, I don't need your money. I'll tell you the truth, I was going to leave anyway. Do you really believe I want you like this? Look at you, what you've become without proper care. A horrible, sick old woman. But you used to be. I'm disgusted. I can finally say that to your face. Really? You could believe that someone like me could love someone like you. That's right, your mother always told you. You're a fool, Jenna. Robert just enjoyed seeing the change in his face at his words. Jenna, how he had longed to say all this to her face. He saw the suffering his words caused the woman and reveled in it. The man took all his belongings, bought with Jenna's money, and this time she didn't stop him. Yes, she didn't care about him. The woman cried in the chair, back in the fetal position. Never had Kelly died. Never her son kicked out of the village home with contempt. Jenna had not experienced half of that pain. What was she experiencing now? Robert was her life. He was the meaning of her whole life. And it turns out her mom was right and her jealous friends. Robert never needed Jenna. All he needed was her money, and now it's gone. And nothing to keep such a gorgeous man after her. Jenna stood up and with a selling gait walked to the mirror. From where a wrinkled, unkept woman looked back at her. Her long, uncolored hair was graying, and her face was better to just shut up about her face. Jenna recoiled from the mirror, walked over to the bed, and collapsed on it face down. The body. The women shook again. Before them, the policeman, who had been a married couple at the mall the day before, was a little surprised to see the injured woman the very next day at his department. Hello, what have you come again? The statement is made according to the form. We'll be looking for your thief. Well, we haven't found her yet. I'll let you know the results by phone. I'd like to reapply. Jenna said in a hoarse voice. My husband stole my card and stole money from it. Yesterday, I kept quiet and he intimidated me. The policeman frowned and stared intently into the victim's face. The woman is not worth it. Your family squabbles to turn into a criminal case. I saw the whole thing. You didn't see anything. Jenna interrupted. I'm going to file a report on my husband. He stole from me. He and that girl are in on it. Let him go to jail. Let him go to jail. Her face appeared a silent sob. Give me the form, I'll write. And then a new shock awaited her. Jenna even shook her head, not believing her own ears. What do you mean there's no inheritance? Are you confused? My mother had a house in the country. Why, she did, and she still does. And I know for a fact she had money saved up. She had a bank account. And I'm the direct heir, the only one. Notary with barely perceptible judgment, gazing at the woman sitting across from her. By coincidence, she was a bit on top of this family's affairs. What an interesting daughter who had turned Kelly into a nursing home to die. And now here she was, like nothing had happened, to collect her inheritance. The notary knew Kelly personally, and Sam even gloated a little when she said there was a house in the village. That's true. Except Kelly didn't even own it at the time of her death. She'd reissued it to her grandson Sam while she was still alive. As soon as he turned 18, Sam, I understand, is your son. He can't get it reissued. Is that legal? I can challenge it. Although it was unprofessional, but the notary could not restrain a caustic chuckle. Even as legally try to challenge you, of course, you can. It's your right, but I'll tell you right away, it's useless. Kelly was in her right mind and solid memory, and I myself will vouch for it. Because I personally did all the paperwork and 100%. I think you will only waste your time and money. Speaking of money, what about her account? The money's still in the mother's account. Again, at the time of Kelly's death, there was nothing in the house or the account. Even though I didn't touch that. That's banking. But I can answer that too. I know about it. At the same time, Kelly closed all her accounts and opened a new one. In the name of your grandson, your son, so I'm telling you again, you have no inheritance. From the notary, Jenna came out the deafening news of no inheritance was like a thunderbolt to her. She was counting on that money. Jenna had recently undergone brain surgery. Paid clinics still found her hematoma formed, apparently after the accident. And to carry out the operation to remove the woman remained their paid clinic, paid room, paid tests. The operation itself, in the end, the remaining money from the sale of the apartment, which could not be cashed by the swindler, scattered so quickly that Jenna did not have time to blink an eye. But even though the operation was conducted by good clinics, the consequences remained. Ira sometimes had tremors in her hands. Her concentration was lost. The woman became absent-minded and work at her former position was now out of the question. Doctors said that with good rehabilitation, the consequences of the operation could be eliminated. But where to get the money for this rehabilitation? Jenna was sure that soon she would have them, so she didn't save much money. At least she was smart enough to pay for the apartment a few months in advance. Otherwise, the woman would be on the street right now. And now Jenna was walking from the notary to this very apartment and gritting her teeth with anger. She was angry at her mother, angry at her son. That's what right he had to this house, to this money. And the woman was also angry at Robert. Angry, though, that's not quite the right word. She suffered, hating him and pining for him at the same time. After Jenna filed a report against her husband, accusing him of stealing her bank card and withdrawing money from it, Robert was held in front of the court. Jenna went to see him on a date. When the man saw her, he was initially overjoyed. "Jenna, I'm sorry. Please forgive me for everything, for the rude words. But it was out of anger. I don't really feel that way. I'm begging you, take the statement. Did you realize you're facing real jail time?" Jenna grinned. "I can even firmly tell you you're going to jail, Robert. I talked to the DA. You're looking at 1.5 years for sure." "1.5 years for what?" "You know I didn't steal anything from you. You gave me the money and the card. But you can't prove it, so you're going to jail." "Jenna, what do you want?" Robert clutched at the iron bars of the bars through which they were allowed to communicate and stared at the face he hated. "Do you want me to beg you? Do you want me on my knees? Come back to me." Softly said Jenna, "Only come back to me forever. And in court, I'll say I was wrong. You didn't steal the card. Your girlfriend stole it." Robert flinched and widened his eyes. This was something he hadn't expected even from Jenna. Yes, after all, how much does this woman disrespect herself? She's willing to forgive his endless cheating, all the words he said to her before he left. And she realizes that these words are true. Robert is even flattered by such love for his person. But he wasn't going to live with Jenna, so he just laughed. "You know what, I'd rather sit down. Whatever they give me, I'll sit down and get out. My sentence will be over someday. And living with you is a life sentence. Living with an ugly, poor, handicapped woman. It's worse than prison." Jenna came out of the detention center as a spitting image, even more humiliated than the first time. She hated the whole world, living on the last pennies and eating cheap sausages. And before, she would have even squeamishly fed her cat such things. There was one last hope. Sam was due back from the army any day now. He couldn't leave his sick mother. We'd have to go to him. Jenna took out her cell phone and looked at the amount of money left on the card. Enough for the ticket to the village, but not back. Kelly's house was noisy and cheerful. The village youths were buzzing there on the occasion of Sam's return from the army. The tables were bursting with refreshments. Emily had done all this with the help of her parents, who had been keeping an eye on the house in the absence of the owner. Sam allowed them to use her grandmother's huge plot of land. And Sveta's parents, in turn, promised to give part of the money from the harvest for the wedding of the young people. Emily could not look at her fiancé. If he went to the army as a boy, now it was already a young man, tall, broad-shouldered, matured. The girl waited for him faithfully. She did not want to look at others at all. How could one notice others when she had the best? She admired Sam and stopped from happiness. That this handsome man in the uniform of Airborne Forces officer belonged only to her. "Emily, let's go out into the air," whispered Sam. They took hands and went out of the house. Sam led the girl out of the house, to the bread and to the still-standing wooden bench. That's because he had a little too much to drink. No, the boy shook his head. "It's just that in the house I'm always waiting. I think Grandma's about to come into the room. God, I miss her. She used to sit on this very bench so often, waiting for me. When I ran away from home, she waited. Imagine, 3 days. And then, so often, when I was in town, Grandma would sit and stare at the road waiting for me." The boy, grasping the air with a hammer and trying not to cry, stared at the very road he was talking about. A lonely figure wandered along it now, and something in this figure seemed painfully familiar to Sam. "It's your mother," Emily exclaimed, as the woman drew near enough to be recognized. Sam, without saying a word, frowned at the approaching mother. "Hello, Sam." Jenna made no attempt to hug her son. instead, with her lived standing at a distance. "Why did you come here? What do you want here? I told you everything after the funeral, and I won't change my decision. Sam, I miss you so much. You're the only one I have left. I broke up with Robert, and I realized how wrong I'd been about him." "We know," Sam chuckled. "I know everything. Under what circumstances did you break up with him?" "I lost my apartment to that bastard. My grandmother was so sorry that when she bought it, she signed it over to you. I'll tell you something else. I even know why you came here. You may be surprised, but the notary you were talking about knew Granny personally. After your visit, she called me right away. You really need Grandma's money, and you came here just for that. Didn't you? But I have more right to it than you, I'll admit. I'm your grandmother's own daughter. And don't forget, I'm your mom." "Mom. Moms don't do that, and neither do daughters. My real mom was my grandmother, and what you did to her, I will never forgive you." You, Sam, choked up listening. "Get out of here. Don't make it a sin." Jenna cried. "Sam, I don't have any money. I can't buy a train ticket. I can't afford to buy food. And I can't work. I need treatment." Now he looked contemptuously and with pity at the woman whom he had once so longed for, so desired her caress and warmth. Before here, he muttered and left. Then Emily sat on the bench with her legs tucked under her head down. She had nothing to say to this awkwardly shifting woman beside her. Sam stepped out and quickly slipped a $5,000 bill into his mother's hands. "This is for your return ticket and food. But this is the first and last time. I don't want to know anything more about you. I don't have a mother. I'm not kidding. Don't talk to me again." Jenna led the way back down the dusty road, dragging her feet like a beaten dog. Sam didn't look at her. He put his arm around Light's shoulders and pulled her to him. "Come on, our friends are missing us." Sam and Emily's wedding was also in the village. Sam wanted to celebrate modestly, but Emily's parents did their best, and the village was buzzing. For 3 days, it's been a year since then, Sam drove a used foreign car with the wind to an unfamiliar house. In this part of town he rarely visited. Next to him in the passenger seat sat his friend. In general, Sam had his own car service on his grandmother's money. He bought a 2-story garage and converted it. Having started his business, Sam took 2 of his former classmates as assistants. Sam had golden hands, and friends are very responsible. So soon there was no shortage of clients in the car service. And then one of these customers tearfully asked the guys to come to his house. For an extra charge, the old Chevrolet Neva did not want to start, and the client could not get to the car service. When the guys drove up to meet them, an old man jumped out of the gate. "Guys, it's good that you didn't refuse. Let's go to the garage, my old lady is there." Sam's friend waved his hand. "We'll see. Don't worry now, I'll just run to the stall here and buy some water. It's too hot to breathe. Step, do you need anything?" "Yes, let's go together," said Sam. "We'll be quick," he nodded to the customer. Entering the stall, Sam was stunned. Behind the counter stood his mother. She was standing behind the counter, her eyes sharply fixed on his ears. "Sam," with hope in her voice, she exclaimed, "How did you find me?" "Give me a bottle of mineral water." Aloofly, as if to a stranger, said Sam. He silently paid and quickly jumped out of the stall. "Sam, who is this? Is this woman an acquaintance of yours?" asked, barely keeping up with Sam suddenly. "No, I don't know this woman." Sam cut Sam off.